Chapter 310. Today's second update. Asking for monthly votes. Suddenly, a dazzling blue light blazed in the midst of the chaotic battle. Lei Jianhong and his sword had transformed into a blue tornado, and had appeared at a rapid speed. Then, they smashed into the defensive circle of the Divine Wind Guards with a bang sound. A loud explosion was heard. More than a dozen members of the Divine Wind Guard were the first to bear the brunt of the attack. They spat out mouthfuls of blood and were sent flying upside down. Lei Jianhong didn't neglect this attack. He lowered his body, and drew a large circle with his sword wrapped in azure xian qi. At least 7 or 8 people were cut in half at the waist by this sword attack. Lei Jianhong was fighting with all his might in an attempt to open a gap. His old strength had been exhausted, and he hadn't yet recovered. Zhang Zuanxiao and the other members of the Divine Storm Guard quickly filled the gap. Moreover, more than 30 swords and blades simultaneously chopped down on Lei Jianhong's body. Lei Jianhong didn't have enough time to catch his breath. He swung his sword a dozen or so times in a defensive position. However, he had already reached the realm of Tianxian. So, he was able to hold his ground even though he was fighting against so many enemies. Lei Jianhong raised his xian qi, and let out a loud roar. His tyrannical sword power reappeared, and dozens of people fell to the ground with serious injuries. Lei Jianhong had broken through the encirclement with his powerful attack. However, he had exerted his xian qi in order to resist the enemy's attack. And, this had injured his vitality. Moreover, he had been stabbed by dozens of swords and blades. Tianxian's skin was as hard as iron, and hadn't sustained any injuries. However, his clothes hadn't been spared. His clothes had been torn to shreds, and looked like the clothes of a beggar. He then turned around, and withdrew from the battle. Lei Jianhong only needed to regulate his breathing for a moment, and he would be able to restore his energy to its original state. However, the result of Lei Beihong's powerful attack was very shocking. The gap on this side had been completely opened. The elite guards of the Li family shouted in unison, and rushed in like a tide. In the other two directions, the other two Tianxian experts also adopted a similar method to create a gap. For a moment, the Divine Wind Guards, who were originally well defended, were exposed, and their formation was thrown into chaos. Lei Jianhong and the other two had been saving their strength to deal with the experts of the Blood Sword sect. But, those people hadn't arrived yet. So, it was assumed that they didn't have any backup. Therefore, the three of them felt relieved, and decided to end this battle as quickly as possible. So, they displayed their true strength at the same time. They didn't even hesitate to consume their xian qi. They were like tigers in a flock of sheep and started a massacre. Man Mang, don't kill me. I'm the vice president of the Jiangnan Trade Union. I surrender. A mournful cry pierced through the blue dome of heaven. It was Meng Xiaosong. The vice president of the Jiangnan Trade Union could no longer resist the fear in his heart and his desire to live, so he proposed to surrender. Zhou Jianming, Lei Wu Bei's second disciple, stood in front of him without any hesitation. Meng Xiaosong was about to chop down with his sword without any hesitation. But, he hadn't expected that his only worthy opponent would kneel down with a plop sound. Tears and snot streamed down his face as he said, "Let me go. Hero, have pity on me. I have a 100-year-old mother at home, and a young child who is crying piteously for food." Meng Xiaosong's tears streamed down his face as he said, "Hero, boo-hoo-hoo. I don't want to die." Zhou Jianming was stunned. He hadn't expected that there would be such a cowardly and shameless person in this world. He's kneeling down in front of the two armies. And, he's the vice president of the Jiangnan Trade Union. Isn't this too shameful? There's no such thing as the most shameless person, only more shameless. Shamelessness has no limits. Fu *k. Get up, you coward. As long as you tell me where those crossbows are, I'll let you live. Zhou Jianming glared angrily and shouted. Yes, those crossbows. Meng Xiaosong rolled his eyes. I would have told you if I knew. In all honesty, how would I know where they kept the crossbows? Isn't this going to take my old life? I really don't know. Hurry up. Fu *k. Why are you rolling your eyes, you coward? Do you want to die? Hurry up and tell me. Zhou Jianming shouted. Hero, spare my life. I'm useless. I really don't know where those crossbows are stored. Meng Xiaosong was terrified and scared. He banged his head on the ground with a bang sound. I'll fuck your mother. What's the use of surrendering then? You're useless. I'll fuck you, you coward. Zhou Jianming opened his eyes wide. Then, he raised his foot and kicked Meng Xiaosong's belly with a bang. Meng Xiaosong was sent flying more than 10 feet away from the ground. Zhou Jianming felt extremely depressed. This coward doesn't know anything, and he wants to surrender, really. Meng Xiaosong was still shouting in the air, spare. The word life hadn't left his mouth when his voice suddenly stopped. A blood-red sword light had appeared in the air. It had easily cut his body in half. Then, its speed hadn't decreased, and it continued to shoot towards Zhou Jianming. Meng Xiaosong's body had been cut in half, and blood had rained down from the sky. A blood-red silhouette had emerged from the rain of blood. It had pierced through. With lightning speed, a streamer had flashed, and had chopped Zhou Jianming's leg. He hadn't yet retracted it. It had been cut in half like a sharp knife cutting tofu. This person's timing is extremely precise. Even Jun Moxie, who was far away on the tree branch, couldn't help but praise him in his heart. I wouldn't be able to do a better job than this person even if I personally attacked him. The level of this sneak attack has been brought to the point of perfection. It has reached the pinnacle. This person had chosen to attack when Meng Xiaosong had surrendered, and Zhou Jianming's hostility had dissipated. Then, he had angrily kicked Meng Xiaosong. When Meng Xiaosong's body had flown to a certain height, Zhou Jianming, Meng Xiaosong, and the assassin's bodies were in an oblique straight line. This had blocked Zhou Jianming's line of sight. It was like a person's eyes. Even if a small leaf had covered his eyes, he wouldn't be able to see the entire forest. This was the so-called "a leaf can't blind the eyes." However, the assassin in the blood-red clothes had suddenly attacked at this extremely subtle point. He had followed the blinding, straight line at a very fast speed. He had pierced through Meng Xiaosong's body, and had gone straight towards Zhou Jianming. Zhou Jianming was depressed and angry at this time. His vigilance was at its lowest. His sword had succeeded. The assassin's Xian Qi cultivation was at the same level as Zhou Jianming. However, his true strength was at most on par with Zhou Jianming. In fact, he might even be slightly weaker than Zhou Jianming. If the two of them had faced each other head-on, the best result would have been that both of them would have been injured. The assassin would have only been able to inflict some minor injuries if he hadn't chosen such a clever timing. However, he had managed to chop off one of Zhou Jianming's legs. Ah! Zhou Jianming screamed in pain as he saw his right leg being chopped off. His blood spurted out like a fountain. Zhou Jianming let out a blood-curdling scream. His eyes almost popped out of their sockets. He raised his head in pain. However, the assassin in the blood-red clothes hadn't relaxed at all. He had successfully chopped off Zhou Jianming's leg with his long sword. Then, he took advantage of the opportunity to cut off Zhou Jianming's right leg from the middle. Zhou Jianming screamed miserably. His voice didn't sound like a human's. He instinctively leapt backwards. However, he had forgotten that his leg had been chopped off. So, he didn't leap out. Instead, he fell backwards. The assassin's elbows were like two sledgehammers that were emitting blue light. They ruthlessly pounded on Zhou Jianming's chest. Zhou Jianming's ribs were broken with several cracking sounds. Zhou Jianming's voice sounded like a dying beast's groan. Blood gushed out of his mouth along with his crushed internal organs. The mask covering his face was long gone. His rough face was twisted like the roots of a tree. His veins were twisting and popping out. The assassin's eyes were cold and cruel. He didn't intend to let Zhou Jianming go. He grabbed his knees with both hands and lifted them up like a thunderbolt. His left leg had just landed, but his right leg had already risen up. He kept pounding on Zhou Jianming's crotch. His elbows were still pounding on Zhou Jianming's chest. His hands were clasped together. They were glowing with a dazzling blue light as they struck Zhou Jianming's temples. Bang! Zhou Jianming's 7 orifices turned into fountains. It was a fountain of blood. His feet moved up and down as he continued to strike Zhou Jianming's body from different directions. He had already brought Zhou Jianming's body several hundred feet away in the blink of an eye. Zhou Jianming had to bear the brunt of his crazy attacks during this process. Zhou Jianming's tall and sturdy body had turned into a pile of rotten meat when it finally came to a stop. Zhou Jianming's tall and sturdy body had turned into a pile of rotten meat. He had turned into a pile of rotten meat from head to toe. His body had withered from head to toe. There wasn't a single sound. Every single bone in his body had turned into powder. He had bumped into many people along the way. Their bones had been smashed by the crazy impact force, and had been sent flying. Second brother. Second brother. 2 heartrending cries of grief and indignation were heard. Lei Jianhong and the third sister Fang Piaohong were so angry that they felt as if their eyes were going to pop out of their sockets. However, it was already too late. Zhou Jianming had already turned into a pile of minced meat. He didn't even have the slightest bit of breath left. He was thoroughly dead. Blood Sword Sect? Who are you? Lei Jianhong's eyes were bloodshot as he stared at that blood-red silhouette. Elder Lei has excellent eyesight. I'm a nobody from the Blood Sword Sect. I've long heard of the great names of the 2 Tianxian experts. It's a great honor to meet you today. That man in blood-red clothes chuckled. He slowly wiped the minced meat and bones off his hands. He then turned around and said with a smile, I wanted to say that I've long heard of the great names of the 3 Tianxian experts. But, second brother has already turned into dregs. So, I have no choice but to speak of the 2 of you. I hope the 2 Tianxian experts won't blame me for my lack of manners. Chapter 311. Today's breakout. First update. Asking for monthly votes. Monthly votes. Brothers and sisters, we are only 1 step away from the top 10. Everyone give me strength. Rush up. I ask you, who are you? Tell me your name if you have the guts. Lei Jianhong's entire body was trembling. His voice was low and intimidating. He didn't pay any attention to the man's taunts. He didn't even glance at his junior brother's corpse. Fang Piaohong's eyes were fixed on her second senior brother's corpse. Her entire body was trembling, and she couldn't utter a single word. The intense battle in the field suddenly came to a halt. Zhao Wuji and the others were rejoicing that they had escaped from death. They didn't care about the fact that the other party had arrived so late. It doesn't matter if he's early or late, as long as he's here. Isn't protecting our own lives more important than anything else? Everyone had stopped fighting, but the atmosphere in the field was getting more and more oppressive. The man in red chuckled. He suddenly raised his hand, and his sleeve made a crisp sound in the air. It was clear that he had hit nothing, but it seemed as if he had hit something solid. A slight sound was heard all around. Suddenly, dozens of silhouettes appeared in all directions. Under the illumination of the fire, these people were all dressed in red, and they stood quietly without moving. However, their eyes were flashing with a cold and frightening light. It seemed as if they were a pack of bloodthirsty wolves waiting for their king's command. The 2 silhouettes slowly drifted forward, and arrived at the side of the red-robed man. Then, they faced Lei Jianhong and Fang Piaohong. The blue radiance on their bodies shone softly, but it gave Lei Jianhong and the others a strong visual impact. These 3 men were Tianxian's powerhouses. They looked around, and saw that there were 10 or so Earth Xian experts present. The rest of them were covered in the misty blue color of Yuxian. There were 30 or 40 of them. Lei Jianhong's heart suddenly turned cold. It was ice cold. How can we fight this battle? The enemy's strength is far above mine. My third junior sister and I are the only ones left on our side. My name? Haha, Master Lei, it's not your first day out here. I am an assassin of the Bloodsword sect, how can I tell you my name? Even if I don't care about you too, I'll still care about Lei Wubei. As for whether I have the guts or not, you might as well ask your second brother. He'll know very clearly. The red-robed man tilted his head as he replied to Lei Jianhong's question. Very good. Lei Jianhong looked at them with grief and indignation. Then, he turned around, Sister, let's go. Wait. The red-clothed man suddenly shouted. Lei Jianhong stopped in his tracks. What? Don't tell me you still want to keep us here. Lei Jianhong laughed miserably, your strength is far above ours, and we're no match for you in a direct confrontation. But, do you think you have the strength to keep us here? Lei Jianhong was right. The top experts of both sides were on the same level as Tian Xian. It wouldn't be difficult for the Bloodsword sect to defeat Lei Jianhong's side. But, it would be impossible for them to keep Lei Jianhong and Fang Piaohong here. As long as the two of them wanted to leave, they could kill their way out at any time and escape far away. Haha, Brother Lei has misunderstood my good intentions. Brother Lei is the only descendant of the cold-blooded master. So, we wouldn't dare to offend you. The red-robed man spoke slowly, but don't you want to take away second master's corpse? Do you want to leave his corpse in the wilderness? Lei Jianhong snorted coldly, but didn't reply. Instead, he suddenly stood up and grabbed Fang Piaohong's hand. He didn't even bother to say a single word. Instead, he jumped up and down on a branch, and disappeared into the night sky. Lei Jianhong understood that he wouldn't be able to escape if he carried Zhou Jianming's corpse. The red-robed man's words were obviously filled with evil intentions. He wanted to keep his sister and him here to avoid future troubles. In fact, the enmity between the two sides had already been established. So, there was no room for negotiation between the two sides. The opposite party would use extreme measures to keep them here as long as he showed that he wanted second brother's corpse. So what if his father was the cold-blooded master? Don't forget, if the two of them really died here, and the Li family's guards were all killed in one fell swoop, then there would truly be no witnesses. At that time, even if his father wanted to seek revenge, he wouldn't be able to find any enemies. And, the opposite party obviously had the strength to do so. Therefore, he made a prompt decision, and immediately flew away. Lei Jianhong's judgment was correct. The opposite party knew that there was no point in intercepting him, so they didn't try to stop him. Suddenly, a milky white mist rose up in the hazy light of the night, and slowly shrouded the entire area. The mist was getting thicker, and gradually seemed to form a thin barrier. This kind of mist always rose up in the mountain forest in the early morning. So, no one paid attention to it. Moreover, there was a burst of fresh mountain air amidst this mist. It was so refreshing that everyone couldn't help but take a few deep breaths. Suddenly, their spirits were roused. However, Jun Imo Xia had come down from the tree at some point in time, and he sighed deeply. What a pity! It's a pity that Lei Jianhong and the others left too early. They would have been wiped out if they had stayed for a little longer. It's a pity that the ecstasy fragrance that I had painstakingly concocted has slipped through the net. The ecstasy fragrance wasn't suitable to be used during the previous battle. The powerful Xian Qi would have blown away the ecstasy fragrance in the blink of an eye, and wouldn't have had any effect. Therefore, Jun Moxie had decided to use this trump card now that the situation had stabilized. The ecstasy fragrance had been refined using the heaven and earth aura of the Hongjun Pagoda. It was almost invisible and traceless. There was still a little smell. Moreover, it was a very refreshing and elegant smell. However, anyone who smelled this elegant smell would unknowingly lose their ability to resist it. Even a Xian Qi expert would experience a drop in their Xian Qi after inhaling a certain amount of the ecstasy fragrance. Their fighting strength would also be greatly reduced. This was Jun Moxie's biggest trump card in this operation. You have finally arrived. Zhang Cun Zhao's body was covered in injuries. He limped over to greet them. Zhao Wuji was also at his side. He looked at these red-clothed people with eyes full of fear, but they were also mixed with infinite flattery. Ah, there was an accident earlier. So, we were delayed for a while. The red-clothed man nodded expressionlessly and said, "Where are the crossbows?" Zhang Cun Zhao looked at Zhao Wuji. Zhao Wuji understood his meaning, and led everyone to the front of the carriages. However, they didn't enter the carriages. Instead, they came to the side of the horses that were pulling the carriages. They first removed the saddle from the horses' bodies. Then, they used their hands to untie a long and almost transparent leather belt from the horses' bodies. Then, they untied it round after round. Finally, they took out a thin piece of fur from the horses' bellies. Then, they made a crashing sound, and dozens of sparkling and translucent crossbows fell to the ground. Zhao Wuji had tied the crossbows here. This scheming is indeed unexpected. It's really amazing. Even if a thief wanted to rob the carriages, they would have searched the carriages at most. If the carriages weren't found, they would have gone in another direction to search. Who would have cared about the horses that were pulling the carriages? There are a total of 350 crossbows. That's 20 more than expected. They've been sent here. The original blueprints have also been burned. There are 20 crossbows tied to the bellies of each horse. The rest of the horses are carrying a total of 7,000 crossbow bolts. This is only the first batch of crossbow bolts. The second batch is still being manufactured. Zhao Wuji said in fear and trepidation. He lowered his head and bowed. He didn't know why, but he felt that the red-clothed man in front of him was overflowing with cold air. It seemed as if the red-clothed man was very dissatisfied with him. Very good. You've completed your task well, the red-clothed man said in a gratified manner. I'll allow you to have a good rest. And, I'll give you a reward. Many thanks. Zhao Wuji was overjoyed. He bowed to express his thanks. But, his head suddenly fell to the ground with a bang before he could finish speaking. There was a flattering smile on his face, but the red-clothed man had suddenly slashed down with his sword. Idiot! This was the red-clothed man's final comment. The reward I'm giving you is to let you reunite with your second brother. You can rest forever in the underworld, the red-clothed man said in a sinister manner. Senior, what's wrong with you? Zhang Cunxiao asked in surprise. But the red-clothed man's palm had already landed on his head, and his brain had burst open. He struggled to speak before he died. Why? Why? I thought that you would be clever. But, it turns out that you're also an idiot. Why are you asking me for the reason? The red-clothed man wiped the blood off his hand. He then smiled and said, You idiots really think that the Blood Sword Hall is cooperating with that stupid pig-like second prince? He doesn't deserve it. He suddenly waved his hand, and said in a stern voice, Attack. All the red-clothed men started to attack at the same time. They had intentionally or unintentionally approached the lucky survivors a moment ago. In fact, they had almost stood together with them. Those lucky survivors knew that their reinforcements had arrived, and that the shadow of death had dispersed. So, they felt relieved, and didn't have the slightest vigilance. The red-clothed leader had issued an order, and the situation had changed drastically. The lucky survivors had been turned upside down in an instant. They hadn't even had the time to think of resisting. They had already fallen to the ground while screaming in agony. The other group of red-clothed men had silently attacked the Li family's warriors who hadn't been taken away by Lei Jianhong and the others when they had left. These people had been led by the two Tianxian experts to attack the others earlier. So, they had gained the upper hand. But now, 3 Tianxian experts had led a group of Earthxian and Yuxian experts to attack them with all their might. The situation had been completely reversed. They had been in despair ever since Lei Jianhong and his companion had left. So, they couldn't muster the slightest courage to resist at this time. So, they had been killed in an instant. Only the dozens of red-clothed men were left on the field at this moment. Their fighting strength was tyrannical. No one had been injured in this round of killing. The white fog between the mountains had become even thicker. Check as soon as possible. Confirm which horse has a crossbow. Pack it up, and withdraw immediately. The leader of the red-clothed men hastily issued an order. He, it's finally my turn. I've been waiting for a long time. But, you haven't fought fiercely enough. Not many people have died. This makes me very unhappy. An illusory laughter was suddenly heard. It came from the left, the right, the front, and the back. It was ever-changing and unfathomable. He then said, "The Blood Sword Hall is really awesome. I'm sincerely convinced and impressed. But, your Blood Sword Hall isn't working for the second prince. So, who are you working for? Or perhaps I should ask, who has such great charisma that it's worth working for? I'm very interested in it. Who? Who's playing tricks on us? Come out." The red-clothed man shouted as he looked around. "Humph. I'm your father, so I'm your father." The man in the shadow smiled wretchedly. He suddenly burst into laughter. "Good son, quickly kneel down and kowtow to welcome your biological father. You're courting death." The red-clothed man was furious. He listened carefully for a moment. Then, he suddenly leaped up. A blue sword light shot out like a long dragon. The sword light rumbled a few times, and several big trees were cut in half. They fell down like a landslide, and the ground was split open. Dust flew everywhere. How is this possible? The red-clothed man, who had just displayed his invincible might and killed an expert of the same level, suddenly cried out in shock. He was shocked to find that his Tian Xian Qi was rapidly depleting. More than half of it had dissipated along with the sword attack just now. There are only things that can't be imagined in this world, but there is nothing that can't be done. Nothing is impossible. The mysterious man in the dark let out a long roar. Then, he suddenly shouted, "Do it!" There was a loud bang in the surroundings. There were a few places on the ground nearby that were overturned like waves. Sand and dirt flew everywhere like an explosion. A few sturdy figures quickly jumped out, and then, people rushed over from all directions. A light figure suddenly appeared in mid-air, and flew toward another Tian Xian expert at an extremely fast speed. The leader of the red-clothed man was shocked. He shouted, "Be careful." As soon as his voice fell, he saw a flash in front of him. A black-clothed and masked figure suddenly appeared in front of him. It turned out that this person's real target was actually him. In great shock, he quickly dodged backward. At the same time, he raised his long sword and was about to attack. But that person followed him like a shadow. He took the initiative to attack first. A cold light flashed, and he stabbed at the red-clothed man's throat. This cold light was extremely fast. Even with the eyesight of the red-clothed man, he couldn't even see clearly what kind of weapon it was. He already felt a cold piercing pain in his throat. The red-clothed man didn't have time to pull out his sword and retreat again. But, he felt a gust of wind on his lower body. A knee fiercely hit his crotch. The red-clothed man was shocked. He raised his buttocks and dodged a foot away like lightning. He was glad that he had avoided this fatal attack. But, he was shocked to see another flash of cold light, which was aimed at his eyes. He used all his remaining strength to retreat to the side. He felt a piercing pain on his face. He knew that the person's sharp weapon had cut through his skin. At the same time, there was a loud bang on his chest. The enemy's elbows had smashed into his chest. He felt a piercing pain in his lower body. The red-clothed man was angry and angry. He was in pain and fear. These were the methods that he had used to deal with Zhou Jianming. His opponent had almost copied them all. But, at this time, their roles had been switched. He was the one being attacked. Moreover, this person's speed was even more ruthless and precise than his own. Chapter 3:12. What frightened him the most was that his Xian Qi was gradually disappearing, and his Dantian was in chaos. Not to mention that he didn't have the time to fight back. Even if he did, he wouldn't be able to do anything to the opponent with his current strength. The opponent's speed was too fast. Not to mention that he was in a state of panic. Profound Qi was the only thing he could rely on, but now, this only thing he could rely on had disappeared. He had even forgotten to circulate his Xian Qi to protect his body, and was simply taking a beating. Bang! The man in red's crotch was hit, and before he could even cry out, he received another heavy blow on the back of his head. He staggered 2 steps forward, only to find that the enemy was already waiting in front of him. In a split second, his body bore the brunt of countless punches and kicks like a storm. This person's speed was like that of a ghost, and the man in red felt that every part of his body was being beaten at the same time. Moreover, every part of his body was enough to kill a person. This person's understanding of the human body had reached an extremely high level. It seemed as if he was hitting randomly, but every hit was aimed at the most uncomfortable part, which was also the most taboo for a martial artist. The man in red's consciousness was already fuzzy, and the only thought in his mind was, this person is even more proficient in the art of killing than the people of my blood sword hall. Who is this person? The other 2 Tianxian assassins were shocked to see this change, and roared in anger as they rushed forward to help. However, as soon as they raised their Xian Qi, they discovered a sad reality. They didn't know when their strength had dissipated by more than half, and they knew that they had been poisoned. In a state of panic, they no longer cared about rescuing their companions, and instead worked hard to circulate the remaining Xian Qi in their bodies, hoping to force the poison out and restore their strength. However, as they circulated their Xian Qi, the remaining Xian Qi dissipated faster and faster. How could they not be alarmed? While they were inexplicably panic-stricken, many people who were hidden in the surroundings suddenly appeared like ghosts, and rushed over at a high speed. Each person's body was flashing with a brilliant golden light. They had no qualms about charging towards the Earth Xian experts, Yu Xian experts, and even Tian Xian experts who were much stronger than them. They held their swords in their hands and slashed at them. It was as if they didn't care about the experts at all. They only cared about a herd of cattle and sheep waiting to be slaughtered. In fact, the highest cultivation of this new batch of enemies was only at the peak of the Gold Xian realm. If they hadn't been poisoned, these red-clothed assassins would have thought that these people weren't even comparable to cattle or sheep waiting to be slaughtered. At best, they would have been nothing more than a bunch of ants. One should know that the lowest cultivation among these assassins was Yu Xian. But at this moment, the tables had turned. Now, in the face of these black-robed men, the existences that were usually like ants had directly transformed into the King of Hell. The overbearing ecstasy fragrance had caused their cultivations to fall to the same level as the enemies in front of them. Moreover, their cultivations were still falling rapidly. Everyone was extremely terrified of this fact, and they no longer had any will to fight. The ecstasy fragrance had completely crushed the will to fight of these so-called cold-blooded assassins. When a powerhouse lost his pride and the powerful combat strength he relied on to survive, his mentality might even be worse than an ordinary person's. Everyone was only thinking of escaping, and they were like a swarm of bees in an instant. On the contrary, the group of Gold Xian experts were full of vigor, and didn't seem to fear death. These 2 groups of people collided like volcanoes erupting in the span of 1 or 2 breaths' time. The faces of this group of men were cold and expressionless. Compared to the unusually cold-blooded assassins in front of them, the expressions on their faces at this moment were more like those of the cruelest and most cold-blooded assassins. Faced with the chaotic and disorderly attacks of the enemy, they didn't dodge or evade. Instead, they stubbornly charged forward, using their shoulders and chests to resist the enemy's attacks, and at the same time, sending their weapons into the enemy's body. It was almost as if they were trading their lives for their lives, and exchanging injuries for their lives. This was an extremely cruel method of fighting. If they were cruel enough to themselves, then they would be even more cruel to their enemies. The battle broke out quickly, but it ended even more quickly. It seemed as if the battle was already half over after a single collision. This was because the assassins who were slashed by this group of men would instantly turn black as soon as their skin was cut. Then, they would stop breathing and lose their lives. The weapons of this group of people were smeared with an incomparably overbearing poison. Even an Earth Xian expert wouldn't be able to withstand this kind of lethal poison for a short period of time. This was the stockpile of poison that Jun Moxie had accumulated when he had forced the poison out of Jun Wui's body. However, it had come in handy at this moment. These people's swords had been soaked in this poison for a night. This poison was a mixture of dozens of different poisons in the world, and could be said to be lethal upon contact. More than 200 men split up into groups of 4 or 5 to deal with one person. The leader would act as a meat shield, and would use his body to resist the enemy's attacks. Then, the remaining 3 or 4 people would swarm forward, and would tear the enemy's body to shreds in a split second. Even if the Earth Xian experts were able to resist for a while, they would still be quickly corroded by the poison, and would die in a split second. This scene was witnessed by the 2 Tian Xian experts who were using all their strength to force out the poison. Even the calm Tian Xian experts couldn't help but twitch their eyebrows, and break out in a cold sweat. Are these people still human? This group of people don't take their own lives, don't they take the lives of their companions as something important? Even if risking one's life on the battlefield is understandable, but this is too unskillful and too barbaric, isn't it? An Earth Xian assassin's blade had pierced through the shoulder, and the back of the blade had almost sunk in. It was almost certain that this was a fatal injury. If the assassin had used just a little more strength, he would have been cut in half. However, this guy didn't even frown, and even fiercely twisted his shoulder, and firmly stuck the blade that had pierced into his body. Then, the other people who had rushed forward with him roared, and dismembered the Earth Xian expert in front of them into minced meat in a split second. Another person had clearly been pierced through the abdomen by a long sword. This was a fatal injury, but he still had an expressionless face, and even used both his hands to firmly lock the edge of the long sword in front of his abdomen. His other hand had grabbed the red-robed Earth Xian assassin's wrist, and he had a sinister smile on his face. At the same time, a large blade and a long sword fell from his side, and another pile of minced meat was turned into minced meat, and then, this group of people. They were even more desperate than the desperados. Desperados were at best fighting with their lives on the line, and they would still be afraid and cowardly at the critical juncture of life and death. However, these burly men had completely disregarded death, and had even brought death to their opponents. 15 Earth Xian assassins, and 40 blood-clothed assassins of Yu Xian's level, had all been annihilated in the blink of an eye. What was even more cruel was that not a single one of these 55 people had been able to preserve their corpses. Every corpse had been disfigured beyond recognition, and they were even more miserable than the previous Zhou Jianming. Originally, this was understandable for an assassin. After all, the best way to confirm a person's death was to dismember their corpse. However, understanding was one thing, but witnessing it with their own eyes, and witnessing so many dismembered corpses to take their lives, one could well imagine the shock they felt. The 2 Tian Xian assassins suddenly had a feeling that they had encountered a pack of wolves when they had entered the Tian Fa forest in search of medicine. And, this group of people in front of them was even more frightening than a pack of wolves. This kind of surging murderous intention, murderous intent, and murderous aura, how could it be limited to the category of an assassin? Even the bloodiest and cruelest Xian beasts in the Tian Fa forest might not be able to do this. Finally, it was followed by an extremely despairing scream. It was extremely miserable, and it was also extremely indignant. However, it stopped abruptly. The 2 men turned their heads to look, and saw that their leader, the Tian Xian assassin who had just killed Zhou Jianming, had both his arms chopped off. His mouth, eyes, and nose had all been smashed into horrifying bloody holes before they could even land on the ground. The 2 men turned their heads to look, and saw that their leader's body had been kicked high into the air with a banged sound. Then, a series of frenzied blows rained down on his throat, heart, crotch, head, and other vital points. The two men could clearly see that none of the blows had gone beyond the range of these vital points. They had been able to maintain such precision under such intensive attacks. Just this point alone was enough to make anyone tremble in fear. Not only because of the precision of the technique, but also because of the cruelty and cold-bloodedness. As long as one or half of those vital points had been hit, it would have been enough to be fatal. Yet, the attacker had attacked in such a manner. It was obvious that he had done it to shock them. Finally, with a cracking sound that made one's teeth ache, the scene stopped moving. That Tianxian assassin, who had been majestic just now, had turned into a complete human stick. The right hand of the black-clothed masked man in front of him was stretched out straight, and his fist had easily pierced through his chest. Then, it came out from his back. That tightly clenched fist was still holding a piece of broken heart. It was hanging in the air just like that. The two Tianxian assassins had goosebumps all over their bodies. This could not be said to be cruel, or cold-bloodedness anymore. This was a pervert. A pervert who had surpassed the limits of human endurance. A pervert who had surpassed the limits of human endurance. This man was naturally Jun Moxie. Seeing that he couldn't drag on any longer, Jun Dashao naturally had to make the first move to gain the upper hand. But after he had made his move, he discovered something that made him feel depressed, extremely depressed, extremely depressed. Jun Xia was the king of assassins of his generation, but he had never had the habit of abusing others. He had always paid attention to killing his opponent in a single blow. He had no choice but to kill his opponent, but he couldn't say it out loud. Even with the effect of the ecstasy fragrance, the enemy's strength had dropped to an unimaginable level. Even if the enemy didn't have the intention to fight, even if he had caught him unprepared from the start, and had been leading the fight with speed, but the strength of a Tianxian expert was too high. The young Master Jun had made rapid progress, and had reached the Jade Xian realm. But there was still a huge disparity between him and the other party. The other party's bones wouldn't have been able to be found under such a concentrated barrage of attacks. However, the guy in front of him had only let out a few painful howls. Chapter 313. If we were to use the saying of the game in his previous life, Jun Dashao's attack power was really too trashy. The opponent was already in a state of naked state, with a huge negative status, but Jun Dashao just couldn't break through his defense, no matter how frequent and intensive the attack was. And this was under the situation where the opponent couldn't gather his qi. This matter really couldn't be explained clearly, it was really too embarrassing. Therefore, Jun Dashao didn't dare to relax a bit, although the attack was intensive, but in his heart, he knew that if he couldn't kill the person in front of him in one blow, as long as he gave the opponent a little chance to react, he would face the situation where he would be at a disadvantage or even be turned around. After all, he only had Yu Xian at most, and the opponent was Tianxian, a real Tianxian realm. Even if the opponent only had 1/10 of his power left, he would still suffer greatly. Therefore, Jun Moxie kept on banging, his fists, knees, elbows, feet, and even heels were already sore from the recoil, but he still refused to relax, and didn't dare to relax, so it seemed that the attack was getting more and more intensive. Such a one-sided battle, in the eyes of outsiders, completely changed the flavor of the battle. In the eyes of outsiders, he could obviously kill the opponent in one blow, but he insisted on using such cruel methods to torture the opponent. It was simply a crime that took pleasure in torturing others. This was simply the legendary torture killing. Moreover, in order to shock the audience, Jun Moxie further dispelled the opponent's momentum. The qi that he displayed was sky blue, the color of Tianxian peak-level qi. As an expert at the peak of the Sky Xian realm, he was madly beating up a Sky Xian realm expert who was a few levels lower than him. Moreover, the other party wasn't even fighting back. Was there really a need to beat him up so relentlessly? I'll just settle it with one punch. Jun Dashao's cheeks were streaming with tears. Who wouldn't want to succeed in one strike? No matter how I thought about it, wasn't it because my strength wasn't enough? Fortunately, this wasn't a game world based on pure data. Even a Sky Xian expert had his limits. Jun Xia continued to throw more than 300 punches at the same spot on his chest. This finally broke through the Xian Qi protecting his body, and destroyed his tyrannical physique that he was so proud of. Then, the last punch pierced through his heart and severed his life. However, he didn't know that after he punched out his last punch, the image of him resting in exhaustion, in the eyes of others, was extremely pretentious, cruel, and perverted. Since you've already killed him, why are you still holding on to his corpse? Like a dried salted fish. Do you want to scare me to death, boss? It's so late at night, nearly 200 people looked at the hitman Jun in awe, and remained silent for a moment. It was too shocking. Too shocking. The other two Tianxian experts looked at Jun Moxie with grief and indignation. They clenched their teeth and asked, "Who are you? Tell me your name if you have the guts. Our Blood Sword Hall will never forget the kindness you've bestowed upon us today. We will repay you in a matter of days." Ha! Repay? Don't tell me you still want to leave. Jun Moxie blinked in surprise. Your imagination is too rich, isn't it? When did I say that I'd let you go? Are you sure you're not dreaming? Are you talking in your sleep? Ha ha ha, we've been poisoned by you, and we've lost more than half of our strength. This is an indisputable fact. Today, we've indeed suffered a crushing defeat. But do you think that you and this bunch of trash and stinking bird eggs in front of you can trap us? Yes, you're a top expert of Tianxian, and your strength is far superior to ours. But even with your ability, you can only stop one of us if we wholeheartedly want to leave. You're dreaming if you think you can stop all of us. So, the one who is really dreaming and talking in your sleep is you. The two blood-clothed Tianxian experts laughed mournfully, and their cold words resounded, "I'm not afraid to tell you the truth. No matter who you are, or whether there's someone behind you, you and your forces are dead. The sweet dreams are gone, but the nightmares will continue to come. Only one of you can stay." What kind of nonsense are you talking about? If I couldn't make you stay, I wouldn't have come tonight. Dreaming? Let's see who's dreaming. Jun Moxie sneered and waved his hand. Kill. 200 people roared at the same time. Even those who were heavily injured ignored their injuries, and once again raised their swords and sabers, and rushed forward like a tide. Ha ha. The two Tianxian assassins laughed and suddenly jumped up, one to the south and the other to the north. Their long bodies flew rapidly. Even if the abnormal leader in front of them had the cultivation of a peak Tianxian expert, he was only one person. How could he take down two experts of the same level who were heading in opposite directions? Jun Moxie snorted and laughed. He didn't even have the intention to move. He only shouted coldly, "Come down." Along with this shout, the sky seemed to have darkened along with this shout. The strong men on the ground scattered in all directions in an orderly manner, and quickly flashed out of the circle. The two blood-clothed assassins looked up, and couldn't help but feel their guts crack at the same time. In midair from all directions, dozens of giant nets with bright hooks covered the sky, covering the entire space within a radius of hundreds of feet. They were densely packed, and there was absolutely no gap between them. They looked in all directions, and found that there were no blind spots. Moreover, most of the nets were overlapping, and there was another one above one net. Even if one could barely break through the first net, there was still a second, or even a third. Just as the two Tianxian assassins were screaming in despair, 40 to 50 large nets fell down with a loud rumble, and trapped them inside. If they hadn't lost all of their strength, they might have been able to use all of their strength to break through these large nets in the blink of an eye. However, their strength had been greatly damaged, and even if they could struggle to break through, they would need a considerable amount of time to gather their strength. However, what they lacked the most right now was time. How could Jun Moxie give them enough time to counterattack? As soon as the order was given, more than 200 burly men threw down their swords and sabers and took out the thick wooden sticks that they had prepared beforehand. They aimed at the two unlucky fellows who were covered by dozens of layers of nets, and smashed them mercilessly. This was a great opportunity for a Gold Xian expert to trample on a Tianxian expert, and they might not even come across it once in a lifetime. So, how could they let it go? Everyone had previously watched Jun Dashao trample on his opponents, and they weren't willing to let Jun Dashao take all the glory. So what if you're a Tianxian expert? I'll still trample you to death. No, it'll be you. The sky-blue radiance of Xian Qi could still be vaguely seen through the layers upon layers of the net. It was obvious that these two Sky Xian experts were still struggling with their lives on the line. They were trying their best to turn the tide. However, the merciless reality was telling them that everything was useless. Wooden sticks that were almost as thick as a person's thighs landed heavily on the two meat eggs with great force. Their nightmares had truly arrived. The two Sky Xian experts had been reluctant to cry out in pain at first, but now, they were screaming with more joy than anything else. Their mournful cries pierced the night sky, and could be heard for several miles. It was as if they were owls. Their other Tianxian companion had also died a miserable death, but he had died under the sneak attack of the young Master Jun, who was at the peak of Tianxian. So, it could be said that he had died a glorious death, but what about the two of them? They were about to be trampled to death by a group of gold Xian ants. How tragic was their life? Speaking of which, these two men were really unlucky. They had brought all of this misery upon themselves, and had nothing to do with anyone else. Jun Moxie had been very worried about these two men. Although they had been poisoned by the ecstasy fragrance, they were still Tianxian experts. Their strength had regressed, but they were still at the Earth Xian level, or even higher. It was impossible for their Xian Qi to degenerate into nothingness. If they were to fight to the death, they would probably cause huge casualties to the 200 guards. Therefore, Jun Moxie had transformed his Xian Qi into the unique color of Tianxian's peak in order to intimidate them. Sure enough, the two men's only choice was to escape immediately, and they had to escape separately. In fact, this wasn't surprising. The strength of these two men was only at the level of Tianxian's primary level. Even if they were at their peak, they would still have to escape if they were to encounter a Tianxian's peak. What's more, their Xian Qi had dissipated by more than half. But when the two of them escaped, they fell right into Jun Mo Xie's trap. He had already arranged for 54 men to hide in the trees, and each of them had 2 large nets in their hands. They had been waiting for this moment. Didn't they see that there were only 200 men? One must know that there were 254 men in total. This was equivalent to 54 skilled fishermen casting a large number of dense nets at the same time. These two men were flustered, and had nowhere to borrow strength from. So, how could they not fall into the trap? These two men were supposed to cause huge casualties to Jun Moxie's side, and they might not even be able to capture them. But, they had become fish in the net. Not only were they fish in the net, but they were also meat on the chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. The 200 men brandished their big sticks as if they didn't care for their lives. It was as if they were threshing soybeans after harvesting in the golden autumn. They were beating the nets happily. As the screams became softer and softer, there was no movement at all. Jun Moxie was afraid that it might be a trap, so he ordered them to continue hammering for the time it took for half an incense stick to burn. There was no other reason than the vigilance of an assassin. After hammering, Jun Dashao went forward to take a look. And, the effect was very good. Even the large nets had been hammered into pieces. As for the inside, it seemed like it couldn't be considered as a human anymore. It couldn't even be considered as meat. It had turned into minced meat. 100% minced meat, even if it was stewed in a pressure cooker for a day, it wouldn't be able to stew to such a state. Jun Moxie squinted his eyes and went forward to take a look. He waved his hand and said, "Immediately clean up the battlefield. If it's an enemy, stab him if he's not dead yet. Take care of our own people. Carry the wounded away. Carefully clean up all the crossbows and arrows. Make sure there are no traces. Start the operation immediately." Everyone roared in agreement. Jun Moxie raised his head, and his eyes looked towards a certain direction in the forest. His eyes seemed to contain a meaningful smile. In a flash, the battlefield had been cleaned up. Jun Mo Xie gave the order, and everyone mounted their horses at the same time. Then, the sound of hoofbeats rang out, and everyone disappeared without a trace in the blink of an eye. Only flesh and blood were left on the ground. It was a complete mess. It was a testimony to this exceptionally bloody battle. Chapter 3:14. After a long time, blurg, 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 in the direction that June Moxie was looking at, there were two people vomiting their guts out. It seemed like they could even vomit out their intestines. Then, the sound of vomiting could be heard. It seemed like there were quite a number of people vomiting. Old Pang, what should we do? Blurg, what else can we do? Blurg, it's useless. Our problem is solved. Let's go back, Blurg. Young Master's hidden strength is indeed astonishing, but his methods are really, Blurg, cruel. My God, Blurg, you shut up. Don't say any more. Blurg. A low and deep bird's cry could be heard. Dozens of people appeared from their hiding places. Almost all of them had pale faces, and the corners of their mouths were continuously dripping. It was obvious that any one of them had vomited quite heavily. It seemed that someone had taken the lead to issue an order. These people also quietly left. From the beginning to the end, they did not show themselves. It was as if they had never been there. The deep curtain of night quickly fell, covering all the sins and dispersing all the blood. Silence reigned in the June residence. It was already past midnight, but Grandpa June's study room was still brightly lit. June Moxie quietly brought his men home. When he saw the light, he suddenly became poetic and sang in his heart, "In the quiet night, the stars are shining." In front of Grandpa's window, the light is still on. He painstakingly wrote the teaching materials. His tall figure is reflected in my heart. June Dashao happily returned to his room and went to sleep. The two groups of men went to rest and recuperate. Apart from the 350 crossbows and 7,000 arrows, there was also 20 to 30,000 taels of shining white silver. June Mo Xia had generously divided the money between the 200 men. The injured would receive an extra 50 taels of silver. Everyone was happy. With the help of June Moxie's elixir, the injuries of the injured quickly recovered and were no longer a problem. Of course, only June Dashao could be so generous. Many of the people who were mobilized this time were injured. Among them, many suffered serious internal and external injuries. Some injuries were fatal. However, with June Dashao's various elixirs, no matter how serious their injuries were, they could recover in a short period of time. The emperor does not send hungry soldiers. Not only did he have the silver to trade with the merchants, June Moxie also gave the order for the hand crossbows to be given to each of his men, so that they could use them to attack the enemy and defend themselves. In any case, they were about to set off for the Southern Heaven region. As long as they reached the Southern Heaven region, they wouldn't have to worry about being discovered. June Dashao had just settled down when Old Pang and his men quietly returned to the mansion. Their faces were pale and their lips were pale. Their footsteps were unsteady. In the study. "Master, you're finally back. I almost vomited to death." Old Pang gasped for breath. "What's wrong?" The old man was very puzzled. "It's the young master. His method was too cruel." "Ugh!" Old Pang said as he felt nauseous again. "Cruel? What happened? Tell me in detail." The old man was even more puzzled. Old Pang was a veteran of the battlefield, and had been with him for decades. In fact, he had been on the battlefield longer than Jun Wuyi. So, it wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that he was a veteran of hundreds of battles. So, what kind of cruelty hadn't he seen? But he had killed at least hundreds of people, and this was the most conservative count. What could have caused him to be like this? "Ugh!" Old Pang said while retching. Finally, he said, "Master, I've seen people kill before. I've even killed many people myself. But, I've never seen someone beat a person to death like this." Then, my fist came out from the person's back and squeezed their heart. I've never seen it before. As for the other two people, not to mention human form, They could even be made into dumplings. They didn't even need to be chopped. Do you still need me to explain in detail? Ugh. Don't say any more. Hurry up and shut up. Ugh. Before he could finish speaking, Grandpa June could already imagine the scene from before. He could not help but retch as well. Old Pang's evil plan had succeeded. He laughed mischievously and quickly left. Rather than vomiting alone, it was better to vomit in front of everyone. That way, it would be fair and reasonable. Grandpa June was a cut above the rest. After retching for a while, he regained his composure. He could not help but smile as he muttered to himself. This little guy really gave me a lot of surprises. That kind of silent poison, really. I wonder how many trump cards this little guy has up his sleeves. However, there was another person in the June family who was very depressed. This person was the recently appointed general of the Southern Heaven City, Jun Wui. He personally led his men to the Ni Chong Pavilion in order to capture Lady Yu and kill her. After all, the crossbows had already arrived. The operation had already begun. Lady Yu's existence no longer had any meaning. This was Jun Moxie's plan. However, when he arrived there, he found out that there was nothing there. After asking around, he found out that Lady Yu and her subordinates had disappeared early in the morning. It was as if they had evaporated into thin air. There was no trace of them at all. Jun Wui was greatly disappointed. He had used Mount Tai to smash an egg. It was like using a stone to smash an egg. However, he had failed in the end, so depressed. Where did the news leak out? Jun Wui was puzzled no matter how he thought about it. Jun Moxie immediately summoned all the relevant people early the next morning. They would set off with the army in the afternoon. So, Jun Moxie was racing against time. Fatty, you must take good care of the aristocratic hall after I leave. You must take responsibility for me. Moreover, the pills that I gave you must be auctioned off at regular intervals. Do it in small batches. Also, pay attention to the confidentiality of your own information. As for the money from the auctions, don't hesitate to buy the high-grade medicinal ingredients that I've listed. As for the ordinary medicinal ingredients, you don't need to deliberately search for them. Moreover, don't search for medicinal ingredients like you did before. Otherwise, you'll attract ridicule. Jun Moxie gave Fatty a bottle of 100 antidotes pills, a bottle of mysterious yang pills, and a bottle of minor yin pills. He would use them to make exorbitant profits. As for the 10 years pill, he naturally wouldn't sell them. However, these 3 elixirs were enough to cause a sensation. Little Yang Imo, you don't need to get involved in the aristocratic hall's transactions. But, if the royal family comes to the aristocratic hall with a request, it doesn't matter if it's excessive or not. It doesn't matter if it's reasonable or not. After all, it's not convenient for Tang Yuan's status to deal with these things. Do you understand? But. The young boy was somewhat hesitant. No buts. It's settled. Jun Moxie decisively concluded, if you feel that you can't handle it, then go back and ask your father, Prince Equivalent. Well, it's settled. There's no need to talk about this anymore. Little Yang Imo went out with a heavy heart after the matter was settled. Jun Moxie then turned to Tang Yuan, the royal family's transactions will be handed over to Yang Imo. It doesn't matter if he suffers a loss. You don't need to care about the loss. Do you understand? I don't understand. Why? If someone from the royal family comes to look for trouble, then this little demon won't be able to handle it. So, he'll just accept his bad luck? Fatty Tang's face was full of complaints. He didn't understand Jun Moxie's decision. I don't need you to understand. I only need you to carry it out. Jun Moxie angrily glared at him. Prince Equivalent's family hadn't been present at the Gifted Scholars' Autumn Banquet in Tianxiang. However, he hadn't opposed Jun Moxie's provocation. It seemed as if everything was still. It had to be said that Prince Equivalent was able to keep his cool. However, this trick wouldn't work in front of Jun Moxie. You can keep your cool? Alright, then I'll add fuel to the fire. You're only thinking of taking out a few taels of silver to make money for this young master. How can it be so cheap? How can this young master take out money for you if I don't tie you to the same chariot as my June family? It's not very honorable to do this. It's despicable to use this to attack a child. But this young master can make an emperor for you if you perform well. What's there to be dissatisfied with? Fatty didn't understand what he meant. However, he kept quiet out of fear when he saw June Moxie's anger. Even he didn't realize that his childhood friend, a debauchee, had such a powerful and domineering temperament. June Moxie turned to Song Shang. Song Shang, you're going to make some wine for our use. You don't need to make too much. Do you understand? Moreover, you're going to be in charge of the aristocratic hall's safety at night. You must ensure that nothing goes wrong. Understood, master. Hai Chen Feng, you must forge the capital's underworld into an iron plate while I'm away. I don't care how much fighting power you have, but how much intelligence you can gather. Do you understand what I mean? For example, the beggars at the city gates, the scattered people on the streets, the bartenders at the restaurants, the pimps at the brothels, the guards at the gates of the aristocratic families, and so on. You must make full use of these people's latent power to dig out valuable information. Remember, intelligence is the most important. You can only consider the issue of fighting power after you've determined the route of the intelligence. Do you understand? A cold light flashed in June Moxie's eyes as he enunciated these words word by word. This also contained his main purpose for governing the underworld. Therefore, he needed to make Hai Chen Feng understand. I understand. Rest assured, young master. Hai Chen Feng, will certainly make the Tianxiang city's underworld an all-pervasive intelligence network. Hai Chen Feng replied solemnly as he understood June Moxie's meaning. Very good. The last and most important matter is the safety of the June family. Hai Chen Feng and Song Shang will be in charge of this. I will only say one thing, anything. There were no accidents. I won't allow it. I'm talking about any situation. Understand? Rest assured, young master. If anyone wants to deal with the June family, they'll have to do it over our dead bodies. Hai Chen Feng and Song Shang replied in unison. If that's the case, then I can rest assured. June Moxie nodded slightly and took out a porcelain bottle. There are 3 pills in this bottle. Take them together and it will increase your pure qi cultivation by 10 years. Tang Yuan, you can ask Hai Chen Feng to help you. Also, this matter is classified as top secret. No one is allowed to leak it. The 3 of them agreed in unison with a fanatical look in their eyes. To be able to increase 10 years of Xian qi cultivation in one go was an exceptionally miraculous matter. Even Fatty Tang, who didn't pay much attention to his martial prowess, was excited by this, not to mention Hai Chen Feng and Song Shang, the 2 Tian Xian experts. You can all disperse for the time being. Go about your own business. You don't need to come and see me off in the afternoon. June Mo Xia waved his hand, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. If this trip goes smoothly, when we return, it will be, ha. He smiled meaningfully, but his eyes revealed a cold glint that was as sharp as a knife's edge. Everyone present couldn't help but tremble as they saw this. What was this young master planning in his heart? Why is this look so frightening? As the sun began to tilt to the west, the general's gathering drum in the middle of the drill ground began to rumble and shake the earth. Most military strategists would choose to go to war in the morning or at sunrise to take advantage of the auspicious meaning of the rising sun. However, this time, they chose to go to war in the afternoon, which was somewhat unusual. At the very least, the mood was not that good. The sun was about to set in the west, so how could it be good? But this was the decision of the Emperor of Tianxiang, so no one dared to question it. The autumn wind was biting cold, and the dead leaves were blown away at low altitude. Hundreds of flags in the drill ground were as red as blood, fluttering in the wind like waves in a sea of blood. Jun Wui was dressed in military attire and sat in a wheelchair as he slowly stepped onto the stage. Although he was sitting in a wheelchair, his sharp eyes and chiseled face still gave everyone a feeling that he could dominate the world. The Blood General who had been silent for 10 years. Finally, he had returned to the army today. 10 years of hardship and 10 years of being disabled hadn't worn away this Blood General's unyielding character. The moment he appeared on the platform, all the generals who had worked with him before were excited to find that the Jun Wui in front of them was still the Blood General from 10 years ago. He was still like a treasured sword that could cut the heavens, radiating light in all directions. He was still as arrogant as ever, and could shake the world. In this seemingly broken body, there was still an earth-shattering, piercingly cold heroic spirit, and a fearless, deep fighting spirit. Once again, he would command thousands of troops. Once again, he would gallop on the battlefield, and display the heroic spirit of the Jun family's men. Suddenly, during the silence at the foot of the platform, a person shouted loudly, "Blood robes." Everyone shouted at the same time, "God of War." "Blood clothes." "God of War." The tsunami-like cheers continued for a long time. Jun Wui's back was exceptionally straight, and he expressionlessly looked at the neat troops below the platform. Wherever his eyes fell, there would be even more enthusiastic cheers. After a round of inspection, Jun Wui slowly raised his hands, and then dropped them down. The cheers around him suddenly came to an abrupt end, as if they had been cut by a knife. On the rough faces, pairs of fervent eyes looked at the idol in their hearts. In the arena of tens of millions of people, apart from the neighing of the warhorses and the flapping of the flags in the wind, there was no other sound. "Brothers! My fellow comrades!" Jun Wui slowly opened his mouth. His clear voice was issued with vigorous xian qi, and everyone in the field could hear it clearly. After 10 years, Jun Wui, am finally standing here again. Jun Wui's eyes slowly swept across the field, and he was solemn and solemn. I will once again fight side by side with my fellow brothers. I will once again stain my conqueror's robe with blood. Even though this time, we are facing mystical beasts that are far more ferocious and more terrifying than the enemy. But, after thousands of battles, we all came back alive. Facing an enemy that was 100 times stronger than us, we also came back victorious. Now, facing mystical beasts, facing these mystical beasts that don't know how to play any tricks, Jun-san, ask you, are you afraid? The last sentence gathered all of Jun Wui's strength, and it exploded like a bolt from the blue. A burst of heroic laughter came from the field. What a joke. We aren't even afraid of the enemy, so why should we be afraid of beasts? Jun Wui's cold eyes swept across the field. I will say it again, is anyone afraid? No. Tens of millions of people shouted at the same time, and every one of them shouted themselves hoarse. The strong roar set off a wave of air that shook the heaven and earth. Good. Whether facing the cunning enemy or the ferocious beasts. Whether facing the heaven and earth or the sky. I, Jun Wui, will give you a word of advice. Jun Wui's eyes were cold, and he suddenly roared, fight. Be fearless. Fight. Be fearless. Tens of thousands of people shouted at the same time, and the scene had already boiled up to the extreme. Jun Wui's words had also aroused the blood of the soldiers to the extreme. Dugu Wudi and the other generals of the kingdom were standing to the side, and their eyes revealed a fanatical look of envy and jealousy. Only the Jun family had been able to create such an exciting scene since the founding of the Tianxiang Empire until now. The Jun family had been silent for 10 years. But, such a situation had reappeared, and it was even more than it had been in the past. The men of the Jun family were fully deserving of the title of God of War. The iron-blooded fighting spirit. For a moment, all the generals in the military field had the same feeling in their hearts. To be able to obtain such an achievement, what regrets would there be in this life? Let the thousands of soldiers and horses boil with us. Life and death don't matter. Jun Wui moved his wheelchair amidst the tsunami-like cheers, and suddenly turned around. He cupped his fists. Your Majesty. This official, Jun Wui, is asking for my resignation. Approved. His Majesty's face turned red as he loudly gave his approval. Play the music. Send the Empire's heroes into battle. Duge Zonghang took a step forward, and roared in a majestic voice. The drums of the expedition sounded like a raging tide, and with the greatest enthusiasm. 8 neatly dressed knights in bright armor rode out on 8 fine horses, and each held a large flag in their hands. The bitingly cold autumn wind blew the huge flag into the air, and it fluttered in the air. It was the color of blood, and there was a large golden character in the middle of the flag, June. All the veteran soldiers of the Tian-Xiang Empire had tears in their eyes. The June family's war flag. The flag that symbolized invincibility, the iron-blooded heroism, had finally appeared after 10 years. It had appeared once again. It was still as soul-stirring as ever. It was still as stirring as ever. The orderly sound of hoofbeats resounded, and a group of knights in bright armor came out in a line, and gradually formed a torrent of iron and steel, surging and galloping against the wind. Their swords pointed to the sky, and their swords pointed to the south. The heroes had fought 100 battles, and the warriors' blood had not yet turned cold. Chapter 3:15. Thank you, brothers, thank you, sisters. Today's first update has arrived. The second update will be slightly later. Tonight, we'll pull an all-nighter. On the second day of the army's departure, to be precise, it was midnight on the day of the army's departure. The emperor of the Tian-Xiang Empire finally received the long-awaited news. He knew that the Zhao family's men had been annihilated along with the Southern Trade Union's men, and the Second Prince's Divine Wind Guards. This news wasn't unexpected for the emperor. After all, this was the only reasonable explanation. Otherwise, wouldn't it be a waste of the arrangements he had made? However, the news didn't stop there. The annihilation of the entire army wasn't limited to this. The Blood Sword Sect's assassins who had participated in this operation had also died a violent death. A total of 3 Sky Xian experts, 15 Earth Xian high-level assassins, and 40 Jade Xian blood-clothed assassins had been completely annihilated. This news had brought about an exceptionally astonishing shock to them. How much strength would be needed to completely annihilate such a force? This wasn't a simple defeat, but a complete annihilation of the entire army. Not a single person had been spared. Moreover, the true core of this incident, the crossbow that several parties had been eagerly waiting for, had also disappeared without a trace. It was a super-killing weapon crafted from Xian beast tendons and well-tempered steel. The emperor slammed the table on the spot and smashed his cup. His gloomy face did not recover for a few days. Regardless of whether it was the hand crossbow or the strength of the Bloodsword sect, they were all things that the emperor placed great importance on. He had never thought that the things that he had planned out so flawlessly and were so close to being in his hands would not be in his hands in the end. Moreover, he had lost nearly half of his elite fighting strength because of this. What made him the most angry was that there was no clue to this incident. He had suffered a loss, and he still didn't know who had done it. There wasn't even the slightest clue. How could the emperor of Tian-Xiang not be depressed? How could he not be angry? This depression and anger had caused the entire imperial palace to be covered in a gloomy fog. Everyone was trembling with fear and trepidation. They were afraid that they would accidentally anger the unhappy emperor. As for the instigator of this incident, the second prince, he had fainted when he heard the news. It wasn't an exaggeration at all. He had directly fainted. There was nothing wrong with fainting. This was because his losses were the greatest among all the participants. The price he had to pay was too great, so great that he couldn't bear it. After all, this batch of materials had been supplied by him. Moreover, they had been bought at the most reasonable price. In fact, it should be said that he had bought them at a sky-high price. Moreover, he had paid double the production cost. Moreover, he had used a large amount of manpower, material resources, and connections. In the end, not only had he lost everything, but his own Divine Wind Guards had also been completely destroyed. After all, that was the most elite force under the command of the second prince. He had spent his entire fortune, but it was all for the benefit of others. The most infuriating thing was that he didn't even know who that other person was. If he didn't pass out, the second prince might not know how to react. Li Yuran was also depressed. The eldest young master Li hadn't lost as much as the second princes. But the price he had paid was also considerable. In fact, it could be said that he had suffered a great loss. He had sent out half of the elite warriors that he had secretly trained. But they had been completely annihilated. Moreover, one of his brothers had been turned into a pile of meat paste. But the most depressing thing was that he didn't know who to look for revenge. Should he look for the Bloodsword sect? Should he look for an assassin's organization for revenge? His brain must have been flooded with water. Didn't he hear that the cold-blooded Master Lei Wu Bei didn't even care about him? The eldest young master hadn't been so smart. He hadn't brought back the second young master's corpse. In fact, the eldest young master would have probably died there. 9 young masters and 1 young master had come to the Tianxiang city to help him a month and a half ago. But 8 of them had already died. The remaining 2 had also become frightened by the mere twang of a bow. The eldest young master Li Yuran was extremely resentful. But another fire was added at this time. The eldest young master Li had taken control of a corner of the Tianxiang city's underground forces. But they had suffered a surprise attack that very night. And they had been forced to retreat. And they had been swallowed up by the Jinyang gang. The Jinyang gang had become the most powerful gang in the Tianxiang city. And they didn't have any competitors. The eldest young master Lei Jianhong and the third young master Fang Piaohong had fought against 2 Tianxian experts that very night. Their opponents were stronger than the eldest young master Lei Jianhong and the third young master Fang Piaohong. But the 2 young master Lei Wu Bei's disciples had lost their fighting spirit. They were flustered, and didn't have the will to fight. In fact, they didn't have the calmness that a Tianxian expert should have. This had made Li Yuran very angry. The 2 young master Lei Wu Bei and the young master Lei Wu Bei had realized their problem. And they felt ashamed of themselves. So, they asked for Li Yuran's resignation. Then, they went to Tianfa to look for their master, Lei Wu Bei, and discuss countermeasures. Li Yuran had readily agreed. She had given them a large sum of money as travel expenses. Then, she had politely escorted the 2 young master Lei Wu Bei out of the door. But young master Yuran's face had turned gloomy after the 2 young master Lei Wu Bei had left. He had muttered a few curses. Then, he suddenly raised his foot and kicked the door of his house into pieces. Ah, he has advanced to the level of a Yuxian expert. He is very powerful. That hard door has been smashed by a single kick. What a sharp kick. The Jinyang gang. Do you really think that I don't know that you're part of Jun Moxie's power? Li Yuran clenched her fists. The look in her eyes gradually calmed down. Then, she slowly loosened her fists. She then smiled gently. Jun Moxie isn't in the capital now. So, do you think that I can't deal with you? I have a way to deal with you. So, I can achieve my goal even if it's difficult to deal with you head-on. Jun Moxie and Jun Dashao's blood was boiling as they participated in the oath-taking ceremony. This was the first time that he had experienced the hot-bloodedness and heroism of a man in the army. However, Jun Dashao couldn't stand it after walking for half a day. There were too many rules in the army. He couldn't do this, and he couldn't do that. Jun Moxie later discovered that his third uncle didn't even know how to walk. And, he didn't even know how to speak. Jun Wui had been away from the army for more than 10 years. Now that he was in control of the army, his temperament was much better than before. He did everything swiftly and decisively. His face was cold, as if he didn't like anyone. Especially towards his nephew, Jun Moxie, and his group of fops, he was even more picky. No matter where they were not pleasing to his eyes. He scolded every single person he met, and scolded every pair he met. He made Jun Moxie, Murong Qianjun, Meng Haizhou, Meng Fei, Li Zhen, Li Feng, and the other young masters of Jun Dashao's families complain incessantly. Jun Moxie certainly knew that the third uncle needed to establish his authority in the army. He needed to establish his authority first. First, he needed to establish an image of strict discipline. Then, he would be able to follow orders and prohibitions. If military discipline was lax from the start, how could they fight a war? They would just be sent to their deaths. Since he needed to establish his authority, he needed a few unlucky scapegoats. Only by killing one to warn 100, killing the chicken to warn the monkey, and making an example out of others, could military discipline be enforced. However, Jun Moxie never expected that he would be the first unlucky one. This matter was very melodramatic. Jun Dashao, who had been on horseback for half the afternoon, had an urgent need to pee. He looked left and right. At this time, they had already left the city. On the left was a forest, and on the right was a field. Not far away, there were a few small villages. The army was advancing. How should he solve this? Of course, this was not a problem for Jun Dashao. He got off the horse and ran to a big tree by the side of the road. He untied his pants and peed to his heart's content. In front of him was a forest with tens of thousands of trees. Behind him, there were thousands of soldiers and horses advancing. Even the person at the edge of the advancing army behind him could reach out and grab a bird's egg. Therefore, this pee of Jun Dashao was very high-spirited. It felt really good. After the eruption, he quickly shook his pants. Just as he was about to pull up his pants, two hands suddenly landed on his shoulders. Leaving the formation without permission, ignoring military discipline, and peeing in public. You are a disgrace. Young general, please come with us. Two law enforcement officers suddenly appeared like heavenly soldiers and caught him red-handed. What, are you guys being reasonable? I clearly had my back to them. What do you mean by peeing in public? Jun Moxie argued. The two law enforcement officers were incorruptible. They grabbed him and left. Poor Jun Dashao didn't even have time to pull up his pants. His thing was still faintly discernible when he was caught under Jun Wui's banner. The result was that Jun Wui had performed a grand punishment for his son. He had given him 20 strokes of the stick. This punishment wasn't heavy, but it wasn't light either. However, no one pleaded for leniency. In fact, this wasn't surprising. Firstly, everyone knew that Jun Dashao was just putting on an act. Secondly, Jun Dashao wasn't very popular. Jun Dashao was a man who didn't easily cry. He raised his head and looked at Jun Wui. He clenched his teeth and said, "Third uncle, you really are an old man. Once you have power in your hands, you will do whatever you want. This nephew is so unlucky. I'm the first one, shut up. There are only subordinates of the general in the barracks. That's your third uncle. Whose nephew are you? Deputy General Jun, you have spoken rudely and disrupted military discipline. You will be punished with 10 strokes of the stick." Jun Wui's face was very serious. Jun Dashao was very sensible. He didn't dare to utter a word. He understood that if he were to speak up again, he would definitely be punished with more strokes of the stick. After 30 strokes of the stick, everyone kept quiet out of fear. Although the debauches Dashao rejoiced in his misfortune, they also kept quiet out of fear. The effect was still good. Jun Wui was aware of his nephew's ability. Don't be fooled by his red and swollen buttocks. It looked like his injuries weren't light. In fact, it wasn't a big deal. In fact, not to mention 30 strokes of the stick, even 300 strokes of the stick wouldn't be enough to injure him. However, he was going to use him as an example. At the same time, Jun Wui had another thought: this kid is too sloppy. That's not good. After all, the Jun family is a family of generals. This is a good opportunity to hone his temperament. This is to lay the foundation for him to lead an army in the future. This wasn't only Jun Wui's idea. It was also Old Man Jun's instruction before he left. This old man must ruthlessly train this kid. The third Master June was prepared to abuse his nephew without the slightest scruple since he had the sword in his hand. However, he stirred up big trouble the first time. June Moxie covered his buttocks with his hands as he walked out of the tent in a resentful manner. He clenched his teeth and glared at everyone. Ah! Isn't this the all-powerful June family's third young master? What's with that expression? Don't tell me you ate the great commander's food? Ha ha ha. Master June Sun Shao, you looked so handsome when you covered your buttocks. This young master admires you. I concede defeat. June Moxie's rival in love when he was pursuing Princess Raimu, Murong Qian Jun of the Murong family, spoke in a strange tone. His shoulders shook in an exaggerated manner. His throat deliberately emitted a strange laughter. This caused Meng Hai Zhou and the others to laugh along with him. June Moxie didn't speak. He slowly walked in front of Murong Qian Jun. Suddenly, he snatched a spear from a nearby soldier. Then, he used the spear as a stick and swung it at Murong Qian Jun's face. His aura quickly drilled into Murong Qian Jun's body. Jun Dashao had a belly full of evil fire. He had nowhere to vent it. But, you actually came to provoke him. Isn't this bad luck? This is what they call intolerable. At least, Jun Dashao wouldn't be able to tolerate it. How could Murong Qian Jun have imagined that this fellow, who had just been punished for violating military discipline, would dare to attack his comrade in public? Caught off guard, he was immediately hit. Actually, even if he had been prepared, he wouldn't have been able to dodge it. He took a solid hit on the head. Immediately, his eyes shone with a golden light. It was as if a sky full of stars had appeared in front of him. The skulls produced by the Murong family were rather sturdy. The long spear immediately broke with a kacha sound. Even though Murong Qian Jun's skulls were sturdy, the quality of his forehead was even better. With a whoosh, a bright red lump immediately sprang up. It was as long as a finger and as thick as a chicken's egg. It stood upright like a unicorn's horn. Ah! Isn't this the distinguished and elegant young Master Murong? How come there's a bird on my forehead after I've disappeared for a while? Could it be that young Master Murong is so gifted that this thing doesn't grow in his crotch but on his forehead? What a pity, what a pity. It's a single egg. This kind of elegant appearance is enough to be unrivaled under the heavens. It's unprecedented. Truly admirable. Jun Moxie laughed heartily. He gestured to his head and no longer pretended to be lame. He casually tossed aside the broken spear and strode away. The spiritual energy he had released just now was just enough to ensure that Murong Qian Jun's skin would not rupture after taking the hit. Instead, it would cause his skin to swell to the maximum extent. Thus, it had created this miraculous and astonishing effect. Everyone turned to look at Murong Qian Jun's forehead and saw that there was a red mark on his forehead. It was standing straight up, and unexpectedly, it really did look like that one. What was even rarer was that other than the fact that the length of the mark was slightly lacking, even the thickness of the mark had reached a certain standard. It was extremely lifelike and lifelike. Chapter 316. Today's second update has arrived. Brothers who have time can wait for an hour or so. Tomorrow's first update will be posted. Those who don't have time can read it tomorrow. Cough cough, a cliché, begging for monthly votes. Ha ha ha. Everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter when they saw the comical scene before them. Even the debauches who had come with Murong Qian Jun to ridicule Jun Moxie were laughing so hard that tears and snot flowed down their cheeks. They hugged their stomachs and twitched. The entire room was filled with men. In this day and age, most of them got married very early. So, everyone knew what that meant. Moreover, in the military life, this kind of dirty talk was very common. But young Master Jun's action was really unexpected and amusing. Even the old generals at the side couldn't help but open their mouths wide and laugh wildly. After laughing a few times, they felt that it was inappropriate and hurriedly held back, but they couldn't help it. In the end, they laughed unscrupulously with their bellies. The only one who was confused was Murong Qian-jun. Murong Qian-jun only felt an unbearable pain in his head. He didn't know that his head had been transformed. He couldn't help but angrily say, "Is it very funny? Beating up your fellow soldiers in the military camp is a heinous crime. This young master, this general will report this matter to the marshal and punish him severely." "Hey! What are you laughing at? What's so funny?" The Ana horn on his head glowed bright red under the sunlight. It seemed to be growing in size. With his anger, the blood in his body surged, making him look even more ferocious. Even his handsome face had changed. He spoke with a serious face, but it created an even more comical effect. This time, the people who were about to restrain themselves no longer cared about their faces. They laughed loudly, and some even rolled on the ground while hugging their stomachs. "Oh, I'm dying of laughter. I can't take it anymore, please spare me, ha." Grand Marshal Jun Wui and the other generals had arrived after hearing the news. So, they became furious when they saw Murong Qian-jun's strange appearance. So, they wanted to laugh. But, they realized that they shouldn't laugh. So, they hastily held it in. But, they had held it in too quickly. And, their laughter had been too great. So, each and every one of them choked. Even the solemn Grand Marshal Jun wasn't an exception. Jun Dashao wasn't spared. He was punished once again. Jun Mo Xia was so angry that he almost wanted to imprison this guy. This was too much of a troublemaker, right? She was simply the legendary troublemaker. Moreover, the energy of the troublemaking sprite had clearly not been used up yet, because the whole thing was not over yet. That night, the two groups of people who had just set up camp had another conflict. The Murong family wanted to avenge their young master and had a conflict with Jun Moxie's 250 guards. Jun Moxie was helpless about this number. Even one more person would have been fine. But, after the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer teams rested, there were only 4 people who couldn't follow the team due to their heavy injuries. The others weren't seriously injured, so they naturally followed. So, Jun Dashao brought his 250 people to join the army. Whenever he had free time, Jun Moxie would feel gloomy. 250 people was fine. But, 250 people, including himself, was exactly 250 plus 1. Damn it, why was this young master so stupid? I could just grab one person and break their leg before coming out. But, that's not right. If I only break one person's leg, then wouldn't it be 250 plus myself? It looks like I'll have to break at least 2 people's legs. That's not right. Wouldn't that be 250 to 1? What a dilemma. The final result of the battle between the two sides was very shocking. These mere 200 people were actually ferocious to the extreme. They directly beat the 500 Murong family soldiers into a sorry state, causing them to complain incessantly. It was hard to describe how crippled they were. Because there were actually more than 10 people who had signs of being crippled. This caused public anger. The aristocratic families all criticized him, but Jun Moxie didn't budge an inch. It looked like another bloody conflict was about to occur. Jun Wui finally realized that his and grandfather Jun Mo Xie's previous plan was nothing more than a fantasy and conjecture. Jun Mo Xie's existence in the army was a complete black sheep, and a malignant tumor. It was best to get rid of him as soon as possible. If he stayed for too long, it would be hard to avoid letting this rat poop spoil a pot of good porridge. He had only come out in the afternoon. The day hadn't passed, the night hadn't arrived, and the sky hadn't darkened yet. This guy had actually been punished 3 times. He had even offended everyone that he could and couldn't offend. If he had really been punished according to military law, his head would have been chopped off at least twice. Take your idiot and get lost. Jun Wui said, in view of your performance, you are now given an important task to atone for your crimes with meritorious service. Jun Moxie will be the vanguard. He will open a path in the mountains, and build a bridge in the rivers. If there is any negligence that results in the loss of the army, you will be presented to me. Jun Moxie suddenly heard this order. It was as if he had been granted amnesty. He happily bowed with his hands clasped in front of him. Then, he used the tone of a petty person who had achieved success, and assumed the posture of someone who had received an order from a play. He appeared to be dignified, but in reality, he was extremely pretentious in a Peking opera. Yes, oh yes. Then, he made a half circle with his hands, and took 2 steps in a slow and steady manner. Then, he turned into small and quick steps, and flew out of the tent in high spirits. He left behind a room full of old men staring at each other. They couldn't help but burst into laughter. This kid is the only 3rd-generation descendant of the Jun family. The direct descendant of the God of War's family. Marshal Jun Wui was at a loss. He could only think of 4 words in his mind: family's misfortune. Jun Dashao didn't care about his 3rd uncle's gloominess. I've finally gotten rid of this shitty military life. I've been beaten up 3 times in less than half a day. And, I can't even fight back. I'll have to walk for at least a month to reach the southern heaven city if this continues. I won't die at that time, and I won't lose face. But, I'll definitely reach the pinnacle of the legendary Iron Buttocks. I'll be the vanguard. He he he. That means that from now on, I'll have the final say. I'm not proficient in opening a path in the mountains, and building a bridge in the rivers. But, I'll sweep away all the bandits and robbers along the way. I won't leave a single one alive. What a good training opportunity. Jun Moxie was afraid that Marshal Jun Wui would suddenly change his orders. So, he issued an order on the same night. And, the 250 men quickly broke camp. They were like a sharp arrow that pierced into the boundless night. And, just as Marshal Jun wished, the 250 plus 1 men disappeared without a trace. 2 days later, Jun Wui realized that his decision to send Jun Moxie as the vanguard was a brilliant one. It was a stroke of genius. Or perhaps, it was the legendary discerning eye for talent. Making the best use of people's talents. Using people to their fullest potential. There was no need to mention the smoothness of the journey. It was as if the army was on a sightseeing tour. They followed the path that Jun Moxie's vanguard had taken. There were no surprises or dangers along the way. Moreover, the officials along the way welcomed them from afar. It was as if they were afraid that their hospitality would be inadequate. As for the military supplies, they were given as gifts. There wasn't the slightest bit of embezzlement. As for the bandits and robbers along the way, Jun Dashao swept them away like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. He swept them away even more than 200 li away from the official road. This journey of the vanguard was a journey of exterminating bandits. The road was filled with blood. It was a road of blood. This was Jun Dashao's journey of tempering himself for the heaven destroyer and soul purification art. Not to mention Jun Moxie, even Jun Wui could imagine the scene of 250 men killing their way to the southern heaven city. What kind of fierce murderous aura would be nurtured? Murderous aura and blood were destined to be the soul of these 2 troops. The first county that Jun Wui led the army through was still okay. But when Jun Wui saw the county magistrate of the second county, it was as if he saw a resentful wife leaning against the door looking at her husband. When the county magistrate looked at Jun Wui, it was as if he saw his mother, no, his father. Tears and snot flowed down his face. It turned out that this guy's official status was slightly inferior. Coincidentally, when Jun Dashao came here, his butt was hurt by the saddle. Thus, this guy's good days had arrived. First of all, Jun Dashao decided to take a carriage. Moreover, it had to be a super luxurious one. Moreover, it had to be completed within 1 day. Moreover, it had to be completed within 2 hours. During this time, Jun Dashao had fully displayed his erudition from his previous life. He had helped the county magistrate to settle the old accounts of the past years. The county magistrate's methods could be considered excellent. He had cautiously gathered nearly 100 craftsmen from far and near. They had conscientiously built a super luxurious carriage in accordance with the strictest standards. They had followed the most comfortable design, and had worked at the fastest speed possible. The materials needed for this carriage had cleanly squandered the pitiful official's years of embezzlement. In fact, he had even incurred a considerable amount of debt. Finally, the construction of the carriage had been confirmed. The pitiful official had trembled with fear as he arrived in front of June Imo-sia to report. June Moxie had been using the account book as a fan at this time. June Moxie had been earnestly educating and advising the county magistrate. "I say, Fei Zhu Chang ah." This guy's name was actually Fei Zhu Chang. Young Master June couldn't help but click his tongue in wonder for a long time when he'd first found out about it. The world was so big, and there were so many strange things in it. This guy's parents were definitely not ordinary. "You're too unprofessional, aren't you? You've been the county magistrate for 5 years, and you've only raked in less than 50,000 taels of silver? That's really too lousy. Crap. You can't even be a corrupt official. No wonder you're almost 40 years old, but you're still a garbage county magistrate. 5 years of embezzlement, my God. You've given me a carriage and it's gone. I heard that it wasn't enough, right?" June Moxie shook his head and sighed. He felt sorry for the county magistrate's misfortune, and was angry at his incompetence. Chapter 317. On the 5th day of August, it erupted for the 3rd time. Today's outburst was the first update. Seeking monthly votes. Sigh, it said that 100,000 taels of silver can be earned in 3 years, but you only managed to earn 50,000 in the past 5 years. What a loser. June Moxie continued to sigh. You yourself said that there are 100,000 magistrates, but I'm just a county magistrate, and a county magistrate with only tens of thousands of people under my jurisdiction. Compared to a magistrate, there are several levels of difference. Fat Pig Sausage continued to mutter in his heart. However, he still maintained a respectful expression on his face as he listened to June Imo-sia's lecture. But it doesn't matter. Perhaps it's better to say that we learn from our mistakes. Now that the young master is here, you will know what to do. The young master will return from the Southern Heaven region in about 2 months. At that time, I'm afraid we won't be able to sit in this carriage anymore. In these 2 months, you have to seize the time to extort money. Hurry up and take bribes. When young master comes back, he still needs to hire a better carriage. You'd better be prepared. Don't be in such a hurry like this time. Opportunities are only given to those who are prepared. June Dashao said. Fat Pig Intestine fell to the ground and kowtowed as if he was pounding garlic with his head. Tears streamed down his face as he said, "Young General, this lowly official will never dare to do it again. This lowly official will definitely repent and turn over a new leaf. This lowly official will repent and turn over a new leaf. Resolutely working for the welfare of the people, working with all one's heart, blood, sweat, and tears. This. You're so cultured." He could actually say so many idioms. Say a few more words. If you say a few more words, perhaps I will soften my heart and show mercy or something. June Moxie looked at him with a smile and praised him. Fat Pig Intestines kowtowed and prostrated himself on the ground. At this moment, he had already made a decision in his heart that he would rather die than change. As an official, it was better to be an honest official and a good official. You can't be a corrupt official. Brothers, you will know the pain of being a corrupt official after meeting this young general. He regretted it so much. This guy actually wanted to build another carriage after 2 months. I cried, my tears spilled in my heart. If she were to cry in front of him, she would probably lose her life. I must summon all the corrupt officials in the world. I must be an honest and upright official. I must serve the people. While June Dashao was plundering the place, the soul-devouring troops outside also came back. They were carrying a human head, and the blood was dripping on the lobby of the county government. The poor fatty intestine almost fainted out of fear. Damn, why are there so many of them? June Imo-sia's vanguard had eaten, drunk and extorted enough. So, he patted his butt and left. Fat Pig Sausage raised his head and looked forward to June Wui's army. After all, Jun Moxie had said, if there's even the slightest mistake in the army's supplies, I'll immediately come back to make a carriage. As for the quality of the military supplies, it was up to Sir Jun Wui to decide. You should weigh the pros and cons, therefore, Fat Pig Sausage's enthusiasm made Jun Wui's hair stand on end. What kind of person is this? As for Jun Imo Xia, the great vanguard, he continued to lead his 250+1 Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer army towards the south in high spirits. He didn't seem to have opened a path in the mountains or built a bridge in the rivers, but the entire way was filled with blood and carnage. Naturally, the strength of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops improved by leaps and bounds under his deliberate bloody training. Each of their temperaments became more and more murderous. Each of them was like a ferocious ghost from hell. Their sharp eyes and cruel aura clearly showed that they were a terrifying existence on the battlefield like a meat grinder. Of course, such an army could move at a very fast pace. Every day, there was only one team to complete the task of exterminating the bandits. They rotated like this. Moreover, the two teams also had to compete against each other. They were competing to see if there were any fish that slipped through the net. The punishment for the losing team was not very severe. In fact, it was very light. They only had to wash the other team's underwear for a day. This kind of competition directly caused the two teams to be like two strong men who had taken a double dose of aphrodisiac, seeing an old pig with double eyelids the moment they saw the bandits. They charged forward like wolves and tigers, chopping melons and vegetables. Punishment was not a problem. Face was more important. It was only the afternoon of the fourth day. Jun Moxie's troops had already opened up a distance of 400 kilometers between them and the main force. Jun Moxie sat leisurely in a carriage pulled by 6 large horses. This carriage was very spacious. It was 2 meters wide and 3.5 meters long. Not only was there a small bed, there was even a tea table and a bench. It was enough for Jun Moxie to hold a meeting in the carriage whenever he felt like it. However, Jun Moxie had only done this once, and it didn't last more than a quarter of an hour. Not for anything else, but this group of men who had been running for a whole day, even though they were wearing shoes, the smell on their feet was enough to make people tumble. Especially in such a sealed carriage. The smell was like a real salted fish that had just been fried. Just like that, Jun Dashao had to let it sit for a whole day before the smell was gone, reporting to young master, in front, there is someone blocking the road. The one who spoke was the leader of the Spirit Devourer, Wang Dong. At this moment, this Soul Devourer leader, whose methods were rather brutal and could be said to have killed people like chickens, was actually stuttering. Blocking the road? Fuck. There is actually someone in Tianxiang Kingdom who dares to block this young master's road? Jun Moxie asked in surprise. He opened the curtain and jumped down. He wanted to see who this extremely daring brother was. As soon as he came out, Jun Moxie took a look and sucked in a breath of cold air. My goodness! No wonder Wang Dong stuttered. Actually, there wasn't anything too frightening in front of him. There were only 2 outstanding beauties in front of him. One of them was dressed in a purple robe. She looked extremely charming, innocent, and adorable. She was holding a snow-white leopard in her arms. The leopard blinked at Jun Imo Xia and stuck out its tongue. It seemed as if it wanted to throw itself into Jun Imo Xia's arms. The other was dressed in a snow-white robe. Her face was as cold as ice. She was cold and arrogant. She was a peerless beauty, graceful and graceful. At this moment, the 2 beauties were looking at Jun Moxie with a satisfied expression like a cat that had caught a mouse. The 2 ladies were Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi. Jun Imo Xia groaned, and felt like fainting. This was too shocking. No wonder he didn't see the 2 ladies pestering him during the 2 days before the expedition. He even thought that they had thought things through. It turned out that they had already left home. But now, they were waiting for him here. What to do? For the first time, Jun Dashao felt regret for being the vanguard. He was truly remorseful. Why did these 2 hot potatoes still fall into his hands in the end? I when did I commit such a sin? Why did I have to be the vanguard? Wouldn't it be nice if I just obediently followed the troops forward? That way, the third uncle would take care of everything. How would I have a chance to worry about it? Now, it was truly a situation where the heavens and earth did not respond to his cries. They were going to Tiannan City, not for a vacation. Jun Dashao didn't know what to say. What could he say? Jun Moxie couldn't help but look back. He really hoped that at this moment, Jun Wui would lead an army of 20,000 to descend from the sky like a heavenly army. Save the pitiful me from the fire and water. That was also an extravagant wish. The distance between them was at least 400 miles. He wouldn't be able to make it in time. Don't look anymore. It's useless to look anymore. We have already inquired about it. We came here especially to wait for you. Guan Qinghan looked at him indifferently. Now, you can get out of the carriage. Sister Xiaoyi and I will sit in the carriage. You can ride the horse. You don't have any objections, do you? Jun Moxie was speechless. It seemed like a friendly discussion. How could I have any objections? How could I dare to have any objections? What was tyrannical and overbearing? That was it. How could what I did to that fat pig intestine be compared to the former queen? She actually chased me out of the carriage. Isn't this the legendary dove occupying the magpie's nest? The members of the Spirit Devourer were secretly laughing. Jun Moxie glared at them. Immediately, the laughter stopped. Everyone looked straight ahead with a solemn expression on their faces. Cough! Cough cough. Jun Moxie cleared his throat. He was ready to use his silver tongue to persuade the two beauties who seemed to have made up their minds. I say, that, sister-in-law, and that. Miss Xiaoyi. Ah, elder brother Amos, yeah, are you pleasantly surprised to see me here? Are you surprised? Do you want to hug me? I know, I understand. I'm like this. Dugu Xiaoyi smiled and jumped in front of Jun Moxie. She then tilted her head and looked at him. She looked like Little White. She wanted to throw herself into his arms. But the little girl was more reserved than Little White. Little White had already jumped over. But Dugu Xiaoyi was probably waiting for Jun Dashao to take the initiative. Then, she would throw herself into his arms. Surprise? I'm horrified. As for the surprise, I don't feel that it's urgent to hug her. But, I want to fiercely spank her small buttocks. Jun Moxie glanced at it as he thought. Well, it doesn't seem small. It should feel good if I spank it twice. Jun Moxie's imagination ran wild for a while. Then, he suddenly thought of something. Why am I wasting time with these two girls at this time? I need to hurry up and drive them back. His complexion sank. Then, Jun Dashao spoke in a sanctimonious manner, Sister-in-law, Miss Dugu, you're worried about us. Amos Ya represents all the officers and men in the southern heaven city in gratitude. But, this journey to Tian Fa is a long one. There are many robbers and bandits. Jackals, wolves, tigers, and leopards are running amok. It's extremely dangerous. Besides, you two are single women. So, it's inconvenient for you to travel together. I'll send someone to send you back to Tianxiang City. Jun Moxie realized that these two girls hadn't even brought a personal maid when he mentioned the word single women. Do they think that this is a public holiday? We're going to war. You can try. I also want to know who dares to send us back. Guan Qinghan didn't care. Lang looked at him. Brother Amos, yeah, do you really have the heart to drive us back? We've already come all the way here. Dugu Xiaoyi didn't have as much confidence as Guan Qinghan. She looked at him pitifully. Her eyes turned red, and it seemed as if she was about to cry. Brother Amos, yeah, this place is more than 1,000 miles away from Tianxiang City. It's such a long journey. If something happens to me and Sister Guan on the way, how can you bear it? Besides, the road is dangerous. It's hard to fathom a person's heart. Don't give me that crap. Tears are useless to me. June Moxie was indifferent. Now you know that the road is dangerous. It's hard to fathom a person's heart. You didn't think of it when you came out? Do you think this young master will believe such a lie? Do you really think I'm an idiot? Chapter 318. This girl's acting skill was really good, but how could June Moxie believe her? Don't be fooled by her pitiful appearance at this moment, it could turn into a domineering one the next moment. You've seen a ghost, so you're not afraid of the dark? June Moxie had experienced it several times. If he was fooled again, there would be no justice in this world. So, you really want to send us back? Dugu Xiaoyi suddenly widened her eyes. Although her pretty big eyes were still so charming when they were widened, she had already started to threaten him. The speed at which she changed her expression had obviously increased. Sisters, the only thing you can do by staying here is to cause trouble. Tell me, what can you two do? What can you do by staying here? Do you dare to kill people? June Moxie sneered disdainfully and said, go back obediently, and nothing will happen. Otherwise, don't blame me for tying you up like rice dumplings and sending you back. Don't think that I can't do that. You two will be the ones who will lose face. You dare. The little girl bared her teeth and revealed her ferocious look. Her true colors were finally revealed. Forget it, Xiaoyi. Don't beg him. This man doesn't have the slightest bit of sympathy. Guan Qinghan still stood there indifferently. She expressionlessly looked at June Moxie, but her words were directed at Dugu Xiaoyi, we'll go by ourselves. There's no need to follow him. Without him, haven't we traveled more than 1,400 miles by ourselves? Don't tell me we don't have a pair of legs? Can't we reach Tiannan with just the two of us? That's right. Why are you so arrogant? We'll go by ourselves. Dugu Xiaoyi raised her chin and said, isn't he just a deputy general? He's just someone who got in through connections. Humph, I've seen a lot of great generals, but none of them are as arrogant as you. When June Moxie saw the two women turn around and leave after saying a few sarcastic words, he became a little anxious. If he allowed them to go to Tiannan like this, even if they managed to reach there safely, he would definitely receive a good scolding when he returned. Grandpa June, the third uncle, Old Man Dugu, and the invincible Dugu wouldn't let him off. In fact, June Moxie could even guess what they would say. You're going to let these two weak women travel thousands of miles to the southern heaven city? How can you be so assured? What if something happened? Even if nothing happened, it wasn't like this. Stop him. Capture them all. June Moxie gritted his teeth and barked out an order. 7 or 8 members of the Spirit Devourer team moved quickly, rushing forward like wolves and tigers, blocking the path of the two girls like an iron tower. June Moxie harumphed twice. The two of you had better be obedient. As long as you follow my will, there will be benefits for you. Humph, otherwise, at this point, June Dashao suddenly stopped talking. Why does his tone sound like that of a bully who has kidnapped women? June Moxie, I must go to the southern heaven city today. But I, Guan Qinghan, will do what I say if you force me to do so. I will die here, in front of you. Do you think I won't dare to do so? The look in Guan Qinghan's eyes was very complicated. But, she pulled out a glittering dagger, and placed it across her jade-like neck. June Moxie, do you know that I must go to the southern heaven city for you and the third uncle? I'm worried that the Shuihan Manor will make things difficult for you because of me. Why would I travel thousands of miles to the southern heaven city if I wasn't worried about the two of you? Do I look like a little girl who can't distinguish between the heavy and the heavy? You, June Moxie, are willing to disregard life and death for me. In fact, you don't even care about anything in order to protect my innocence. Do you think that I, Guan Qinghan, am an ungrateful woman who will watch you go deep into the tiger's den? Do you think that only you men are allowed to be righteous, and we women can only drag out an ignoble existence? It's fine if things go smoothly in the southern heaven city. But, if, Why would I, Guan Qinghan, be stingy with my life? Dugu Xiaoyi didn't beat around the bush. But, she saw that Guan Qinghan's trick seemed to be working. So, she became arrogant and complacent as she said, yes. We'll die here if you don't ask us to go. Do you think we won't dare to do so? Humph, he. I've never seen someone who's about to commit suicide act so proudly. Eldest young Miss Guan's words were impassioned and passionate, but this little girl's words had directly changed the meaning of her words. In fact, she had even laughed at the end. I'm really speechless. June Moxie had a big headache at this time. Dugu Xiaoyi may wish to see the world in chaos. But, he could see from the calm look in Guan Qinghan's eyes that Guan Qinghan would do what she said. I'll soon see a corpse if I don't ask her to go. I can't take this gamble. I don't dare to take this gamble. You're ruthless. June Moxie stared at young Lady Guan. He then sighed with hatred. June Dashao was confident that he could make her retreat in the face of difficulties if he wanted to deal with this little girl. But this sister-in-law of his had too much of a personality. So, he couldn't afford to provoke her. June Dashao felt extremely sullen in his heart. He had never felt so sullen in his 2 lives. So, he hatefully said, give them 2 horses. Let's ride them. That's more like it. Guan Qinghan cast a sidelong glance at him. Then, she finally smiled. She only wanted to go to Southern Heaven City. She didn't care about the treatment. She also understood that June Moxie was taking a huge risk by taking them along. Not to mention anything else, but in terms of military discipline, it was a taboo in the army to take a woman along in the midst of a battle. It could easily put one's life in danger. We want to ride the carriage. The little girl was young and inexperienced. So, she didn't realize this point. She was very happy when she saw that June Dashao had relented. But, she heard that June Dashao didn't have any intention of inviting them to the carriage. Instead, he had only arranged 2 horses for them. So, she immediately pouted and looked at him while panting with anger. Then, she looked at the extremely gorgeous carriage. She felt tired all over. Her waist, hip, and every other part of her body was aching. No way. It's already good enough that I'm willing to take you along. But, you still want to ride the carriage? June Moxie snorted disdainfully, it's up to you whether you want to go or not. If you don't want to go, I can arrange someone to send you back. Someone, give them 2 horses. Fine. Dugu Xiaoyi pointed at him in a flustered and exasperated manner. Suddenly, she rolled her eyes and pulled out her saber. Then, she placed it on her neck. If you don't let me ride the carriage, I'll die in front of you. Do you think I don't dare to? This little girl had seen that Guan Qinghan had threatened to kill herself, which had directly played a decisive role. Her previous imitation had also added fuel to the fire. It was very effective. Now that she had such a good move in her hands, how could she not use it? A good move was not afraid of being used repeatedly. As long as it worked, it was fine. Who knew that this time, as soon as she said, "Do you think I don't dare to?" there was suddenly a burst of uncontrollable laughter. Then, she looked at the grim faces of those men. Each and every one of them was shaking their shoulders. It was obvious that they were trying very hard to suppress their laughter. You can't blame these people for not having high moral standards. Even a clown wouldn't do such a thing. Young Lady Guan had said that she would die without any tricks. But, young Lady Dugu had imitated her once, and that was fine. But, she had done it again and again. This was truly inexcusable. Moreover, this time's excuse was too outrageous. Did she say that she would die because she didn't allow her to sit in the carriage? Then, you'll die too easily. June Moxie rolled his eyes. Do as you please. But, please die a little farther away. Out of sight, out of mind. Please, this request isn't too much to ask, right? Elder sister, even if you really want to threaten me with death, you should at least have the will to die in order to threaten me. Otherwise, wouldn't you be successful in every endeavor? I'll die if you don't let me ride the carriage. I'll die if you don't let me eat. I'll die if you don't let me beat you up. You're too hateful. Dugu Xiaoyi stamped her feet. She was at a loss for words. Then, she suddenly twisted her waist, and strode to the front of the carriage. She lifted the curtain, and entered the carriage. Then, she didn't come out. She called out from inside, "Elder sister Qing Han, come in quickly. It's so big inside. And, there's a bed. It's so comfortable, hee. Action is the most practical thing." Jun Dashao was furious. This is intolerable. Where will I go if you're inside? I've caught a corrupt official with great difficulty. I've extorted a carriage from him. I've put in so much effort. Do you think it's easy for me? Are you going to plagiarize the fruits of my labor? Humph. Jun Moxie strode forward like an arrow. He reached out and grabbed Dugu Xiaoyi's arm. "You, get down." "I won't get down. I won't get down. I want to ride the carriage." Dugu Xiaoyi's other hand quickly grabbed the inner wall of the carriage. She struggled with all her might. Her little face was flushed red, and she refused to let go. A white shadow flashed, and a fragrant wind drifted by. Guan Qing Han was already sitting in the carriage. She reached out and patted Jun Moxie's hand, and said angrily, snatching a carriage from a woman, "You're a young master from an aristocratic family." Jun Moxie said angrily, "What? I snatched a carriage from you? How can you say that? It's obviously you two women who snatched my carriage. Do you think this young master is going to suffer in silence? Today, do you know what it means to twist words and force logic, to be unreasonable and cunning?" Guan Qing Han no longer paid attention to him. She reached out and put down the curtain of the carriage. Following that, there was a rustling sound inside. It seemed that the two women were lying on the bed and had even undressed to sleep. He could clearly hear Dugu Xiaoyi's satisfied moan, "It's so comfortable. I can finally sleep peacefully." Jun Moxie's chest was filled with anger. He scolded himself for being an idiot. How could he lay out the facts and reason with a woman? If he wasn't an idiot, then what was? But now that his sister-in-law had already entered the carriage, no matter how unruly Jun Dashao was, he still had to avoid suspicion. No matter how unwilling he was, he had to get off the carriage. The procession continued to move forward. After walking for half a day, Jun Dashao finally swayed on the horse. Although this mount was also a strong horse, it was not as comfortable as staying in the carriage. He looked back with hatred. Suddenly, he frowned and came up with a plan. The next moment, Jun Dashao screamed. His head tilted and he fell from the horse. He fell to the ground with his eyes closed and was unconscious. All the guards panicked. But no one was a fool. They instantly understood what was going on. One by one, they cried out, "Not good. Young master has fainted. His injury hasn't healed yet." Their voices were very tragic. "Injury hasn't healed yet?" Young Master Jun was flabbergasted as he fainted. "When did I get injured?" "Well. But this reason is really good. I have to find a chance to praise and reward them later. They are really smart." "What happened?" Dugu Xiaoyi opened the curtain of the carriage and asked with concern. On the other side, Guan Qing Han looked at Jun Moxie who had fainted on the ground thoughtfully. Chapter 319. Young Master. Young Master was injured before. He can't ride a horse. That's why he got this carriage. The leader of the Spirit Devourer squad, Wang Dong, was sweating profusely, not from fear, but from suffocation. This guy had never made up a lie before, let alone this kind of unreliable lie. Finally, he was a bit quick-witted, and after thinking about how he violated military discipline, he finally made up this lie. Quickly carry the young master to the carriage and quickly examine him." A few members of the Spirit Devourer squad anxiously suggested. Don't look at them as a group of murderers, but it seemed that all of them had good acting skills. Dugu Xiaoyi hastily jumped down. Let me see, quickly let me see. Aya, quickly carry him to the carriage first, this person is really. Why didn't he say earlier that he was injured? Everyone was sweating profusely, and in a flurry, they lifted Jun Dashao's unconscious body and carried it to the carriage. In the carriage, Guan Qinghan wanted to say something, but in the end, she didn't say it. She shook her head and helplessly looked at the unconscious Jun Dashao. She didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She more or less understood her brother-in-law's character. Dugu Xiaoyi still stretched her head and anxiously asked, how did he get injured? When did he get injured? What kind of injury did he get? Is it serious? Do you have medicine? What medicine? Who injured him? The series of questions made these cold-blooded members of the Spirit Devourer squad flabbergasted, and they didn't know how to answer. The lie just now was barely able to cover up, but these probing questions weren't easy to answer. The young master breaking military discipline and being punished was even more shameful. Moreover, it seemed that the young master's injury had already healed, and he was already fine. Xiao Yi. Come in first, don't ask any more. Guan Qinghan's voice sounded, and the little girl shrunk her head in. Inside, they could hear her asking, Big Sister Qinghan, what should we do? What should we do? Aya, how did this guy get injured? This is so worrying. The members of the Soul Devourer team outside were all sweating profusely. Pfft. Guan Qinghan couldn't help but laugh. At this moment, Jun Moxie woke up and asked weakly, where am I? Before Guan Qinghan had time to speak, the little girl had already excitedly said, in the car, in the car. Oh, alas, you finally woke up. What kind of injury did you suffer? Hurry up and tell me how to treat it, I'll help you. Guan Qinghan rolled her eyes. This little girl was really naive. I'm injured. I was injured a while ago, but it's already healed. The reason why I'm so weak isn't because I was injured. I was poisoned. Young Master Jun whimpered as he secretly sniffed twice. Damn it, men and women are really different. I've been in the carriage for a few days, and there wasn't any fragrance. But these two travel-worn beauties had only entered the carriage for a short while, and the carriage was already filled with fragrance. Poisoned? Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes widened in shock. What poison? Is it very serious? Do you know what poison it is? Is it difficult to cure? Alas! I was careless and was poisoned by someone. Jun Moxie said with infinite regret, speaking of this, cough cough, it's a long story. I just need to rest for 2 days. Telling you will only make things more difficult for you. You guys aren't willing to cure me. Who said that? Why wouldn't we be willing? Quickly say it. Quickly say it, how do you cure me? Dugu Xiaoyi was anxious. Why is this person so unhappy? You're poisoned and you're still dawdling. Don't you know that I care about you? Cough cough, the poison I'm poisoned, is called yin-yang harmony powder. Jun Moxie raised his head sneakily, trying to observe the situation. He saw Guan Qinghan's fierce eyes and Leng Leng's cold stare. He couldn't help but be shocked and didn't continue speaking. Yin-yang harmony powder? Just hearing the 2 words yin-yang is scary enough. Tell me, how do you cure it? Dugu Xiaoyi was anxious like an ant on a hot pan. Her delicate little nose was actually sweating. This yin-yang harmony powder, it's difficult to cure, but it's easy to cure, hee, cough cough. Jun Moxie almost laughed sinisterly. He hurriedly coughed twice, because this poison can't be cured with medicine. It's easy to cure it, but it's quite difficult. Besides, it requires you to make a big sacrifice. It's okay. For you, no matter what sacrifice I have to make, I'm willing. The little girl patted her chest. Guan Qinghan, who was at the side, faintly felt that something was wrong with this matter. This guy was clearly pretending to faint. Xiaoyi, this little fool, was too worried and didn't see it. But now he wanted to use this as a pretext to create a bad idea? Alas, actually, it only requires, cough cough, intercourse between a man and a woman, and the poison will be cured. Jun Moxie seemed to be very embarrassed. He covered his mouth and coughed a few times. Otherwise, within 3 days, I'm bound to die from the fire of desire. Alas, I know it's very difficult for you. Forget it, it's my fate. Jun Dashao said very dejectedly. Ah. What? If I want to cure the poison, I have to, with you. Dugu Xiaoyi's eyes suddenly widened. Her face suddenly turned red, and she became bashful. Although she was young and pure, she still understood the word intercourse. Guan Qinghan, who was standing at the side, had certainly thought that her brother-in-law would definitely make trouble, but she had never thought that this guy was so lazy and shameless that he could actually make such a scene. Previously, when she heard the name Yin-Yang Harmony Powder, she felt that it was very strange. She felt that there was something wrong with it. However, Guan Qinghan was still a virgin and didn't understand the matters between a man and a woman. Moreover, she also underestimated the degree of shamelessness of Jun Moxie. She didn't expect this guy to be so outrageous. Letting him into the carriage was already exceptionally tolerant, and now he actually wanted to, Jun Moxie. Guan Qinghan's willowy eyebrows were raised, and her phoenix eyes were filled with killing intent. You bastard, have you had enough? Do you want me to drive you off again? Letting you into the carriage is already good enough. Don't be so ungrateful. Sister Qinghan. Don't be angry. He's still poisoned. That's a matter of life and death. Dugu Xiaoyi looked at Guan Qinghan worriedly and tried to persuade her. He's not injured at all, and he's not poisoned either. There's no such thing as yin-yang harmony powder. Guan Qinghan became even more furious. He was still fine when he was sitting in the carriage, but he fainted after riding on the horse. The people outside said that he was injured, but he said that he was poisoned. Sister Xiaoyi, when are you going to be deceived by him? Can't you wake up a little and use your little brain? Ah. Sister Qinghan, don't be angry. You mean, he's actually pretending? He's not poisoned at all? Dugu Xiaoyi's face suddenly flushed red. She bared her fangs and brandished her claws in anger. Thinking that she really believed his words and was thinking about how to deceive Sister Qinghan so that she could detoxify his poison, Dugu Xiaoyi couldn't help but feel extremely embarrassed. In a split second, even her neck turned red. She buried her head into Guan Qinghan's bosom and shouted with her face covered, Sister Qinghan. I don't want to live anymore. She couldn't help but stomp her feet as she spoke. Ah, you're not really going to detoxify his poison, are you? Guan Qinghan was really cold. This little girl is too easy to fool, right? Ah, it seems that I remembered wrongly. So I'm not poisoned. Jun Moxie awkwardly coughed a few times and said softly. The two girls rolled their eyes at the same time. How can you remember wrongly? Jun Moxie slowly sat up and smiled as he said, the road is long, and the time is long. It's so boring. How about I tell you a story? The two girls stared at Jun Dashao in astonishment. They couldn't believe that there was someone in this world who could be so thick-skinned. His lies had been exposed, his treacherous schemes had been exposed, and his dirty intentions had been exposed. But this guy's face wasn't red, and he wasn't even out of breath. In fact, he didn't even have the slightest bit of an embarrassed expression on his face. In fact, he had even shamelessly said, I'll tell you a story. Ease the awkward atmosphere. What kind of person is this? What's this person's face made of? Dugu Xiaoyi screamed as she threw herself at him, I'll let you lie to me. I'll let you. You scoundrel, Z. The days passed by, and Jun Dashao's life became more and more comfortable. Not to mention the plundering and extortion along the way, Jun Dashao had already made a huge windfall. He had the company of two beautiful women during the day and at night. The fragrant fragrance and the warm fragrance of soft jade made June Moxie so happy that he forgot about his duties. If it wasn't for the fact that his body's unlocking the heavens fortune automatically operated at all times, he would have probably thrown his cultivation to the back of his mind. However, June Dashao's art of unlocking the heavens fortune's bottleneck had loosened along the way. He would have broken through Yu Xian's mid-level Xian Qi, and would soon reach the peak of Yu Xian's Xian Qi. The Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops had been engaged in bloody battles almost every day along the way. Their imposing manner had become more and more solemn, and more than 200 people were showing signs of breaking through. When 250 people gathered together, their murderous aura was enough to make anyone's heart tremble in fear. June Dashao had hoped that this beautiful journey would last for a few more days. However, the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer troops had been dispatched less and less frequently. Therefore, June Dashao had come to a conclusion: the mountains in front of him were obviously steeper, the roads more dangerous, and the forests more dense. This should have been a paradise for the heroes of the underworld, but the number of bandits and robbers had unexpectedly decreased. It was only because they were getting closer to the Shuehan Manor that these petty bandits had naturally disappeared without a trace. Young master, our destination is the Tian Fa forest in another 600 kilometers. The Shuehan Manor is located in a slightly more remote location, outside of Tian Fa, near the Tiannan city. They occupy the two mountain ranges facing the Tian Fa forest. Wang Dong pointed as he reported to June Moxie. Why are you so slow? We've been walking for so many days. June Moxie bent his fingers. We've been walking for an entire month. Weren't you guys quite fast the last time? Young master, we were marching with light equipment. We didn't have as many misgivings as we did this time. Everything was based on speed. The last time we came and went, we spurred our horses at full speed. We traveled day and night. We could have traveled at least 1,300 kilometers in one day and one night. Moreover, we chose a different direction to go to the Tian Fa forest. There aren't many high-level Xian beasts there. Most of them are low-level Xian beasts that we can deal with. If we had gone in this direction, I'm afraid that none of our 300 people would have been able to come out. Moreover, we're following the main army this time. Although we're the vanguard, we can't be too far from the main army. We still have to suppress bandits along the way. This kind of speed is actually very fast, Wang Dong explained. Chapter 320. Today's two chapters are combined. My condition isn't good. I had a low fever, and my body temperature hovered between 36.8 and 37.5 degrees Celsius. My brain seemed to have turned into a pile of mush. I'm sorry, I've already taken the medicine. I just hope that I can sleep well tonight. I'll be better tomorrow. First, we'll find a place near a mountain and a river. We'll set up camp and wait for the main army to arrive. Then, we'll set off together. June Moxie ordered. They were about to arrive at the Shuehan Manor. June Moxie naturally didn't want to foolishly take the lead and look for trouble. Everyone should go together even if they were to suffer misfortune. June Dashao wanted to hide in the dark if the conditions allowed. After all, the Shuehan Manor wasn't a good place in June Dashao's mind. Even if the entire Shuehan Manor were to be wiped out, June Dashao wouldn't feel sad. Besides, this matter is out of anyone's control, but I'm the one who started it. Tian Fa's Xian Beast Tide is in some ways my team. So, we're at least allies. Wang Dong sent out 8 people to look for a suitable place to set up camp in 8 different directions. Finally, they found a suitable place. June Moxie, Guan Qinghan, and Duga Xiaoyi went over to take a look. They immediately found it. It was a small hillside. There was an open space in front of the hillside. It was surrounded by dense woods. There was a bend in the road. They only needed to set up a spy here, and the situation would be clear at a glance. The sound of water coming from behind the hillside could be heard. They went around to take a look, and found that it was a small stream. It was winding down from the hillside. The water was so clear that the bottom could be seen. Not far downstream, after a turn, there was actually a clear pool. Du Xiaoyi and Guan Qinghan were excited to see this pool. Girls were naturally fastidious about cleanliness. During this period of trekking, the route they took was mostly military route, so there was no suitable opportunity for them to seriously clean themselves. Even if they occasionally came across a barren mountain inn for the night, they would at most have a simple bath. They could not be at home, where they would have a huge bucket of hot water and a fragrant bath. It was as satisfying as that. Du Xiaoyi felt itchy all over her body when she saw such a clear pool. Guan Qinghan also looked at the pool. She was also tempted. However, she was thinking a little more. She understood the character of her brother-in-law very well. It could be said that he wasn't very good. If she and little sister Xiaoyi were bathing here, he might really peek. No matter what, she had to think of a way to ensure that he wouldn't peek. Otherwise, wouldn't she die of embarrassment? When Jun Mo Xia saw this pool, he coughed in a dignified manner and turned his head away, pretending that he hadn't noticed it. Along the way, Jun Moxie and the others saw groups of Jianghu practitioners passing by them from time to time. They were all rushing to Tiannan to provide support. But these comrades all had the same attitude towards Jun Moxie's troops. They either looked at them disdainfully or glanced at them from the corner of their eyes. It was obvious that the army had no place in the hearts of these Jianghu practitioners. Of course, Jun Moxie didn't care about them at all. But the number of Jianghu practitioners they met became fewer and fewer these days. The road was rather deserted. Outside the forest was a three-way road. It meandered into the distance. Every road was empty. There was no sign of human habitation. Looking up at the sky was especially blue even though it was far away from the city. While the 200 guards were setting up camp, Jun Moxie, Guan Qinghan, and the others came to the entrance of the valley to avoid the hot construction site. Jun Daxiao and the two beauties weren't the only ones who came out to take a breather. There were 4 other people behind them. They were the captains and vice-captains of the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer squadrons. Jun Mo Xia exhaled a long breath, feeling the emptiness of the surroundings, the silence of the sky, and the chirping of the cicadas in the forest. His mind was in a state of chaos, but at the same time, it seemed very calm. His thoughts seemed to be quite complicated, but also very simple. Finally, he could not help but feel a sense of loss. A moment of perplexity could be a fatal flaw for an assassin. Even a top-notch assassin like Jun Moxie was no exception. But at this moment, Jun Moxie was truly perplexed. Moreover, he was not perplexed for even a moment. It's been nearly half a year since I've transmigrated into this world. My soul doesn't belong to this world. I've been fighting every day, just like in my previous life. But I've been using my mind a lot, and my hands and feet have been moving very little. I've been pretending to be crazy a lot. But I've been using my iron blood methods a lot less. Almost half a year had passed in the blink of an eye. I've been immersed in these boring matters for a long time. So, I've come to this world. What have I come to do? Is it to dominate the world? Is it to be a marquis? Or is it to be free and unfettered for a lifetime? In the end, what is it for? Jun Moxie put his hands behind his back and slowly walked forward. But the eyes of the 6 people behind him were filled with astonishment. The Jun Mo Xia before her eyes had been swept away from his previous flirtatious, slippery, and debauchee appearance. His entire temperament had undergone a qualitative transformation. In fact, it could be said that he had become a transcendent hermit. Although she could clearly see that every step he took was on solid ground, but she could clearly feel that every step he took was strolling into another space and time. Another time, another space, all in a mysterious place that no one knew about. At this moment, everyone suddenly had an extremely mysterious and unfathomable feeling. This mysterious young master before them seemed as if he didn't belong to this world. Or perhaps, it should be said that he had never belonged to this world. This kind of peculiar feeling was obviously absurd to the extreme, but it was real. He walked step by step. But it seemed as if everything in this world, including the people beside him, the soil under his feet, the trees on both sides, and the dust in the air, had nothing to do with him. Everything coexisted harmoniously. But the only thing that didn't harmonize was that big living person in front of them. It seemed as if he was the only independent existence in this world. He didn't intertwine with anything, nor did he blend with anything. June Moxie, this person, was actually an independent little world. This feeling wasn't the loneliness of being at the top. Instead, it was detachment. And a desolate and boundless austere killing intent. Detached from everything in this world, yet able to intervene in it at any time. Heaven and earth don't have me, I don't exist in this world. Heaven and earth have me, I am in this world. Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi almost forgot to walk. They stared at the figure in front of them blankly. There was only one thought in their mind. Could this be his real face? After a long time, Dugu Xiaoyi couldn't help but want to go forward and talk to June Moxie. She suddenly felt a little afraid of this strange feeling of being away from June Moxie. But Guan Qinghan hurriedly pulled her back to stop her from talking. Although Guan Qinghan didn't understand what June Moxie was doing at this moment, and why he was acting like this all of a sudden, Guan Qinghan still keenly felt that June Moxie couldn't be disturbed at this moment. Even the slightest sound could interrupt this transcendent abnormality. June Moxie suddenly let out a long sigh and stopped moving forward. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked up at the sky. The white clouds were leisurely drifting. He shook his head with a bitter smile and just stood there quietly. He only felt that his mind was empty, clear, and infinitely bright. No thoughts, not stagnant in the dust. His whole person seemed to suddenly return to reality from the illusion. June Mo Xia could clearly feel that his spiritual power had improved by leaps and bounds. But he hadn't broken through the previous bottleneck. In fact, it seemed as if there was a layer of fog in front of his eyes. So, it was hazy and unclear. If he could break through this layer, his whole spiritual consciousness would definitely be greatly improved. And the source of this layer of obstruction, June Moxie could vaguely feel. It came from his heart. Mo Xia, just now, what were you thinking about? Guan Qinghan's voice was still so cold, but June Moxie could clearly hear that Guan Qinghan's voice had an extra touch of concern and care. Guan Qinghan was exceptionally intelligent. When she saw that June Moxie suddenly fell into this wonderful state, she felt that it seemed that June Moxie was about to make an unexpected breakthrough at a critical juncture. However, after he was immersed in this wonderful state for a period of time, he suddenly seemed like an immortal who was about to become an immortal who was suddenly beaten back to the mortal world by a stick. The difference between the two feelings was so obvious that she finally couldn't help but ask. I was just thinking. June Moxie's mind was still a little absent-minded, as if half of his foot was still stuck in that wonderful state. He said slowly, in this life, what do I want to do? Or rather, why did I come to this world? Or, what is my goal? What can I do? What can I do? Goal? Guan Qinghan hesitated. Shouldn't people have a goal when they are alive? She asked herself secretly, what about me? Why am I still alive? Where is my goal? Suddenly thinking of this, Guan Qinghan also felt a little lost. Brother-in-law should naturally have his goal, but do I still have the qualification to pursue any goal? Do I really have the qualification? Yes, we should have a goal. Everyone should have one. I used to have an idea, which was to use my own strength to return a clear sky to the world, to use slaughter and blood to clean up what I thought was a dirty world, to a certain extent, bring the world to the kind of peace and prosperity that I longed for. At least in my eyes, there shouldn't be so many injustices. June Moxie smiled bitterly. I never cared about what other people thought. I just stubbornly used my own way to do what I thought was right. I did things my own way. Although I knew that it was just a cup of water to fill the sea, I never changed my original intention. But, after coming here, I'm at a loss, truly at a loss. Guan Qinghan naturally didn't know what June Moxie meant by filling the sea, and she also didn't understand what June Moxie meant by coming here. But she could hear a strong sense of loneliness in June Moxie's heart. This actually made her heart, which was as calm as still water, feel a faint pain. It was like seeing a fighter who never gave up. After exhausting all his strength and all his ability, he suddenly found that the enemy in front of him was the whole world. He could never be defeated, or destroyed. It turned out that what he had persisted in his whole life was just like a mantis trying to stop a chariot, a mayfly trying to shake a tree. That kind of helplessness and desolate unwillingness couldn't be described with words. After pondering for a moment, Guan Qinghan comforted her in a soft voice. It's hard to say what one's life is all about. For us women, it's just a matter of supporting our husbands and educating our children. Day by day, year by year, no matter how old we get, we don't feel too disappointed. I believe that most women in this world are like this. Moreover, there are still countless women who feel happy and satisfied in this kind of dull but fixed life. As for you men, especially those who have power, strength, and ability, you are all striving for your own fame and glory. You are always fighting fiercely and fiercely. Even the most mediocre commoner will work hard to be a so-called superior person in their eyes for the sake of having a better life. While she was speaking, June Xia had already turned around. His sparkling eyes were fixed on her, but there was no frivolity in his eyes, nor was there any of his usual amazement. There was only a very calm and deep look in his eyes, as if he was pondering something. In this feudal society, there weren't many women who could see so clearly like Guan Qinghan. This made June Moxie a little surprised. Actually, in this world, most men live too tirelessly. And it's not really worth it. There was confusion in Guan Qinghan's eyes, but there was also determination and even a little disdain. It seemed that the so-called pursuit of men in this world wasn't worth mentioning in her eyes. Then, what do you think this world is for? Or, what should it be for? June Xia said thoughtfully. I don't know what other people are for, and I don't have the qualifications to speak on behalf of others. But, I know myself. Guan Qinghan said slowly, but her eyes were shining brightly. I, Guan Qinghan, am only a weak woman. Moreover, the world makes fools of people. I'm afraid that I don't have the qualifications to serve my husband and children in this life. At this moment, I only seek peace of mind, and this life will be enough. Yes, I, Guan Qinghan, only seek peace of mind. That year, I was engaged to June Mou for the sake of my family. Although I had never met him, I had no other choice for the sake of my family and my parents. Because, at that time, I was willing to do anything for my parents. Therefore, my heart was at peace. From the beginning to the end, I had only met June Mou twice. Although I couldn't say that I had any feelings for him, but I knew that June Mou was a man with iron bones. He was a great man. Moreover, I had already been engaged, so I had to accept my fate. Then, June Mou died in battle. But, I felt that such a good man was worth sacrificing for. Therefore, I was willing to sacrifice myself for June Mou, the hero of the empire. I was willing to live in the June family as a widow. On one hand, I wanted to leave my disheartened family. But the most important reason was June Mou's heroic spirit. So, I, Guan Qinghan, felt that I would go against my conscience if I broke off the engagement. In fact, my choice wasn't wrong. I was alone at that time, and I was extremely lonely. But, my heart was at peace. This time, I didn't hesitate to go to Tian Fa with my weak body in order for June Xia and his nephew to return safely to their homeland. I was prepared to take on any difficult task. I didn't hesitate to pay any price to ensure that June Xia and his nephew could return safely to the north. I was prepared to sacrifice myself for these two people. But, this was only a peace of mind. I didn't ask for anything else. That's all. The June family has treated me as a relative. If I were to watch June Wu-yi and June Xia die because of me, then I, Guan Qinghan, would be worse than a beast. Moreover, there was another extremely secretive reason. June Imo Xia seemed to be very affectionate towards her. She used to be as cold as ice and didn't care about it. But recently, she had been showing faint signs of losing control of her mind. Especially when June Imo Xia had helped her to break through her limits and increase her Xian Qi cultivation. That faintly discernible skin-to-skin contact between the two of them had caused Guan Qinghan to have many nightmares. These recent events had greatly frightened Guan Qinghan. What if, therefore, it would be better to use this trip to Tianfa as an excuse to end all troubles once and for all? I'll sever all worldly disputes. I'll use my pure body to repay the June family's kindness. And, I'll also sever my brother-in-law's infatuation. My heart will be at peace once everything has been severed. The June family's style will not change. The Guan family's style will not be tainted. The two families' prestige will not fall. As for myself, I don't need to think about it. That's right. Well said. Well said. Ha ha ha. June Imo Xia suddenly laughed like a madman. I only seek peace of mind. Who cares about right and wrong? Haha, people often say, I only seek peace of mind and righteousness. But, who would have thought that peace of mind and righteousness contradict each other? So, it doesn't matter whether I kill or save someone. I only seek peace of mind, and I won't disappoint this world of mortals. I, June Imo Xia, have lived my life not for the country, not for the people. But, I've lived my life in peace. As long as everything is in accordance with my own heart, that's all. Why do I need to think so much? What country's prosperity and people's peace? What world affairs? That's all bullshit. In this life, I'll do things my own way. I'll be unscrupulous. I want to be free and unrestrained. No matter who it is, don't even think about controlling my thoughts. No matter who it is, don't even think about restricting my actions. What does it have to do with me? What does it have to do with me? With my own heart, I'll take revenge. With my own will, I'll roam the world. As long as I have a clear conscience, I'll be able to stand tall. This life is enough. June Imo Xia laughed. Unintentionally, Guan Qinghan had untied the knot in his heart. He was very happy. June Dashao was happy on this side. On the other side, Guan Qinghan and Dugu Xiaoyi were extremely shocked. Even the Heaven Destroyer and Spirit Devourer captains could clearly feel the change in June Imo Xia. The June Imo Xia in front of them seemed to have completed a shocking transformation in an instant. From a flamboyant and frivolous young master of an aristocratic family, he suddenly became a hermit expert. This kind of change was undoubtedly abrupt. However, there was an even more abrupt transformation after that. From a transcendent expert, he transformed into a cold and gloomy expert. At that moment, he was like a sharp sword that had just been unsheathed. He stood proudly between the heavens and the earth, as if he could reflect tens of thousands of rays of light. The world may be big, but it could no longer bind him. The inexplicable confusion in June Imo Xia's heart was swept away. He only felt refreshed. Unknowingly, his state of mind had taken a big step forward. Perfect and transparent, not bound by material things. In this life, how can I be content with the status quo and sleep in Tianxiang? I'll roam the world with my sword. I'll look down on all the heroes in the world. I'll climb to the peak and ask who the hero is. I don't want to rule the world. But, no one in the world can point fingers at me. They can't deal with me. They can't deal with my family. My goal is finally clear. I want the June family to become an existence that far surpasses the Silver Blizzard City and the Shuihan Manor. I want to become the peak existence in this world. Even if it's an emperor, a general, or a peerless master, no one would dare to look me in the eye. And all of this will require the accumulation of countless blood. But, my heart is at peace. This is the direction I've been working towards. I have no regrets. The corners of June Imo Xia's mouth curled into a cold smile as he softly said, my journey of slaughter will begin in the southern heaven city if that's the case. His body suddenly burst forth with an endless murderous aura. It spiraled in the air, and soared into the sky. This unparalleled aura stirred up the clothes of the 6 people around him. The withered leaves of late autumn were already struggling at death's door. But they were forced to leave the branches by his murderous aura, and started to swirl down with the wind. It seemed as if an earth-shattering rain of yellow leaves had started to fall. Several small birds left the branches, and flapped their wings twice. But they were invaded by the murderous aura, and started to cry mournfully as they fell to the ground. 3 figures were flying through the forest in the distance. But they suddenly stopped, and looked towards this direction in a dignified manner. One of them said in a heavy tone, "What a terrifying murderous aura! Who's over there?" The 2 men beside him also had a cautious look on their faces as they looked towards this direction from afar. One of them said thoughtfully, "Could it be that Chu Chihuan has arrived?" "I don't think so. Chu Chihuan has such a murderous aura, but Chu Chihuan's aura is the sharpest and most concentrated. If it were Chu Chihuan, his aura would be indomitable, and it would only be in one direction. But this person's murderous aura is earth-shattering. Comparing the 2, it's completely different. We can be sure that this person isn't Chu Chihuan. But his murderous aura is not inferior to that of the supreme assassin, Chu Chihuan. In fact, it's even stronger. No matter who it is, let's go and take a look." Another man suggested, "Even if the supreme assassin, Chu Chihuan, is there, with the strength of the 3 of us, we may not be afraid of him." "All right." The black-bearded middle-aged man thought for a while, and then agreed decisively. He said heroically, "That's right. When have we, the 3 swords of Dongfang, been afraid of anyone? Even if Chu Chihuan is here, do you think we'll be afraid?" "That's right, big brother. I heard that the Jun family's 3rd master is the commander this time. Shouldn't you and I?" A short and vigorous man muttered to himself. "No. Mother hasn't been able to get over what happened that year. She was injured because of it, and her meridians were clogged. How could this have happened if it wasn't for the Jun family? Little sister has been in a deep sleep for 10 years. Her vitality is almost gone. What's the purpose of this? This time, Jun Wui can go back alive if he has the ability. If he doesn't, then he can die here." "What does that have to do with us?" the black-bearded middle-aged man said angrily. "But even if he does, that Jun Moxie is our nephew. He's our blood relative." Even Mother had spoken out in the past. Are you still indifferent?" the short middle-aged man asked in a somewhat unconvinced manner. "What a sin." The black-bearded middle-aged man sighed and said resolutely, "I obviously won't allow anything to happen to Jun Moxie. But the Jun family's matter has nothing to do with us. I also know that Jun Wui is a good man. But my brother-in-law and my 2 nephews wouldn't have met with such an accident if it weren't for him. So, there's no need to talk about this anymore." Chapter 321. "Big brother, how about we go to Tianxiang together after this matter in Tiannan City?" the short man asked cautiously as he flew. "What are we going to do? Are we going to look for trouble or to kill people? Which one of them isn't strenuous and unrewarding? Don't you remember the lesson from back then?" The black-bearded middle-aged man rolled his eyes and reprimanded. "No, I've never forgotten what happened back then. I'm just wondering if I should take that kid Imo Xia and let him stay with my little sister for a couple of days. I've heard that the kid isn't as tyrannical as he used to be. He's grown up a lot. My little sister, she's been in a coma for 10 years. The short man said with a distressed look on his face. "This matter needs to be considered at length. How can I not feel distressed for my little sister? But that kid Imo Xia's conduct is too bad. He did all those bad things in his early years. Also, the last time the old monkey went home, he reported to Mother about his nephew's conduct. Mother was always looking forward to seeing him. She was so angry that she almost fainted. Have you forgotten? If he weren't my nephew, I would have gotten rid of him. It's rumored that he's grown up. But, it's only a rumor. If the rumor is wrong, and that kid's conduct is even worse than the rumors say, then wouldn't Mother die of anger? Let's investigate in secret first. The black-bearded middle-aged man sighed. There was a dim look in his eyes. And, that's true. That kid is really too disappointing. My little sister's innate talent is outstanding. Brother-in-law Wu Hui is also a dragon among men. How can their descendants be so unbearable? But, let's take a look first. What if the prodigal son turns over a new leaf? Wouldn't that be a great joy? Moreover, it wasn't easy for us to come out this time. We have to do something before we go back. Big Brother, the Silver Blizzard City will certainly send people over this time. How about we kill a few of them for fun? Killing those kids from the Silver Blizzard City is the best way to vent one's anger. The short man bared his teeth, and revealed a sinister smile. That's right. If there's a chance, there's no harm in killing a few of them for fun. The black-bearded middle-aged man nodded and warned, but we must not let anyone know that we did it. Of course. Killing a few arrogant kids from the Silver City would be the most pleasing thing in the world. This is to avenge brother-in-law, and also to vent anger for my sister. The other two laughed sinisterly. He rubbed his palms together and was filled with battle intent. Outside the forest, at a fork in the road, June Moxie, who was standing with his hands clasped behind his back, suddenly froze. His expression changed slightly before returning to normal. June Dashao's gaze focused in a certain direction. That was because there were three powerful auras rapidly approaching. Judging from the direction they were heading, their target seemed to be him. June Moxie narrowed his eyes, but his mind was in turmoil. Tianxiang City doesn't know how big the world is, and it doesn't know how picturesque the rivers and mountains are. Any one of these three auras possessed the strength of a spirit Xian expert. In fact, each of them was at the same level as the Silver Blizzard City's elders. However, this wasn't enough to cause the hitman June's expression to change. It was probably because these three people were faintly emitting an astonishing murderous aura. In fact, June Mo Xia wouldn't have been able to detect this aura if he hadn't been a top-notch assassin. In fact, the hitman June was certain that the 3rd, 6th, and 9th elders of the Silver Blizzard City would have died an ugly death if they were to face these three people. Such an expert would be hard to find in a place like Tianxiang City. But now, three of them had appeared in front of him. How would I have known that there were so many strange people in the world if I had only been holed up in the Tianxiang City? I've only just come out, and I've already seen so many wonderful people. It seems that I'll have to come out more often. June Dashao's thoughts moved as the three silhouettes appeared in front of him. They were led by a man with a black beard and a calm complexion. Another man had a moderate build, and was slightly thin. The last man was quite short, with a big head and small eyes. In fact, he looked like a big monkey. It was very comical. The three of them stared blankly as they landed on the ground. They had thought that some great person had arrived in this place when they had sensed that monstrous murderous aura. Therefore, they had rushed over to take a look. Perhaps they would be able to befriend this person. That murderous aura alone was enough to make them worth befriending. However, they had come to find that everything was beyond their expectations. There were only 3 young men and a young woman standing here. Moreover, there were 4 big men standing there. The cultivation of these people was clear at a glance. The 2 beautiful young women seemed to be at the middle level of the Gold Shen realm. Considering their age, they could be said to be rare geniuses. As for that young man, he was already as strong as Yu Xian at such a young age. The younger generation would surpass the older in time. Although such a cultivation was rare, it wasn't enough to put these 3 people in their eyes. At most, they would be surprised to find out what kind of power could nurture these 3 heavenly geniuses. However, they wouldn't pose any threat to them. As for the 4 big men behind them, although their murderous aura was extremely strong, their overall strength was only average. The one with the highest cultivation was at the level of Yu Xian. The other three were at the Gold Xian realm. Although they weren't weak at their age, they weren't enough to reach the apex. There were hundreds of people bustling about in the forest. It seemed that every one of them was at the Gold Xian realm. For a small team like this, it could be said that they were extremely precious and rare. But they were also not enough to enter the eyes of these three experts. In fact, a small team consisting of 200 people with the strength of a Gold Xian first level could be said to be one of a kind even among the nations of the world. The level of luxury involved in such a small team had reached an appalling level. In fact, even the major empires might not be able to set up a small team consisting of Gold Xian experts so easily. Therefore, if one were to look at it from an ordinary point of view, the strength that Jun Moxie possessed could absolutely influence the direction of any worldly war. However, in the eyes of the great experts of Shenxian's level, there wasn't much difference between this force and an ordinary person's. At most, they would be slightly stronger than an ant. This was because the focus of experts at different levels was different. Therefore, in the eyes of these three great experts, this valiant team that could move any emperor in the world was only a so-so. The only thing that could truly cause these three great experts to be moved and feel strange was that aura just now. What exactly was going on? Young man, let me ask you, was there anyone who stopped here just now and left in a flash? As long as you answer truthfully, you will naturally be rewarded. Do you understand? The short man was called Dongfang Wendao. He was the third brother of the three. The other two were called Dongfang Wenqing and the thin man was called Dongfang Wenjian. The three of them were brothers. Dongfang Wendao saw that his two brothers were unwilling to speak. His status was the lowest among them. Therefore, he was the one who asked the questions. It was fine if he asked the question, but his attitude was not right. Not only did he not look at them, but he also spoke in a condescending tone as if he was interrogating them. In fact, it wasn't surprising that Dongfang Wendao asked the question in such a way. Although his strength was the weakest among the three brothers, he still had the valiant strength of Shenxian's second-level Xian. Facing a few Gold Xian experts like Yu Xian, he felt that he was already giving them face by speaking. Not to mention, he even promised to give them benefits. It would be a great gift if a Spirit Xian expert could receive pointers from a Spirit Xian expert. Even if it was only a few moves, or even just a few words, one could benefit from it for the rest of their lives. Even the eldest and second brother of the Dongfang brothers looked as if it was a matter of course. They didn't think that there was anything wrong with their brother's question. If someone else had asked such a question, they would have probably accepted it. In fact, they would have happily answered the question in great detail. Then, they would have tried their best to curry favor with these three experts. However, it was a pity that he had run into Jun Moxie, the hitman Jun. This guy was unmoved by force or persuasion. Moreover, he wasn't willing to accept any threats. Even if it was a threat from the three Shenxian experts. The former Mo Xia had only vaguely seen his three uncles about 10 years ago. He was only 6 or 7 years old at that time. His original debauchee character had made him forget about those three grown men a long time ago. The current Jun Moxie didn't even have the slightest impression of them after taking over his body. The former Mo Xia had already forgotten about those rubbish thoughts. So, how could he recall them? The former Mo Xia's three uncles were the same. Who would have thought that a naughty brat with a runny nose 10 years ago would have been able to associate him with this handsome, elegant, and talented youth in front of them? They had almost forgotten about him a long time ago. Although they could see that the youth was handsome and vaguely familiar, they couldn't think of anything else. In their minds, their rumored nephew was a wastrel from head to toe. How could he be like this youth in front of them? He was handsome, cute, and had a noble, unsullied temperament. Moreover, the youth in front of them had cultivated to the level of Yu Xian's middle stage. But their own nephew was rumored to be a debauchee whose meridians had been destroyed. No matter what, it was difficult to associate them with each other. He, little sister Xiao Yi, do you see this? This kind of tree can't be found in our world. In late autumn, the leaves turn silver, but they don't fall. Once spring arrives, they return to their original green color. It's really wonderful. If possible, how about we take 2 of these trees back home and plant them? Jun Moxie didn't seem to hear Dongfang Wendao's question. He smiled faintly, and pointed to a tree as he introduced it to Dugu Xiaoyi. Dongfang Wendao suddenly flew into a rage. The other party doesn't even put me in his eyes? That's too embarrassing for me, the third master Dongfang. He roared, lowered his voice, and asked fiercely, "Kid, I'm asking you a question. Are you deaf? Didn't you hear the third master's question? Are you asking for a beating?" The black-bearded middle-aged man, Dongfang Wenqing, frowned and said, "Third brother, you can ask questions, but don't scare the kid." He was also a little apprehensive in his heart. With this kid's cultivation, he can definitely feel our aura. Not only is he not surprised, but he can also be so calm, and even ignore us. Could it be that he has some powerful backing? Or, is he the descendant of some famous family? But even if he has some powerful backing, he shouldn't be so arrogant when facing 3 Shenxian experts at the same time, right? There's nothing special in this place. Could the super expert who emitted a shocking murderous aura be related to this kid? Or is he hiding in the dark? Dongfang Wendao turned around and grinned, and said, "Big brother, I know, but kids need to be disciplined." You're tuning into the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.